Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angie Housman. Angie Housman was born on February 18, 1984, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father left the family before she was born, and she would never have the chance to meet him. However, her mother married a man named Ronald when she was 1 year old, and in the addition of a younger brother to the family. The two sisters got along very well, with Angie particularly fond of her younger brother. Angie was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, always striving to build relationships with those around her. Her family resided in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in St. Louis. In 1993, at the age of 9, Angie attended the 4th grade at a local elementary school, about a mile away from her home. Her daily go-to-school involved taking a bus from a nearby stop, which her parents considered relatively safe due to its proximity to their house. Typically, Angie and her neighborhood friends walked together from the school to the bus stop after class. There were many parents watching from their windows to ensure their safety. This has become a habit in their neighborhood, intended to provide peace of mind that children will return home safely. On November 18th, Angie followed her usual routine, attending school and finishing at 3 p.m. She took the school bus home with a few neighborhood kids. At that point, the other kids continued to their homes. Angie walked alone the short remaining distance home, because her house was farther away. However, Angie didn't arrive home, and as the minutes passed, her parents started to worry. They knew Angie often chatted with friends on her way home, but it has never taken this long. Concerned, Angie's mom and stepdad decided to walk along her route from the house to the bus stop to see if they could find her. While walking, they met other kids from Angie's school. They confirmed she had gotten off the bus with them and headed in the direction of her home. The parents also spoke with neighbors who usually kept an eye on the kids, but were preoccupied on that particular day and hadn't seen anything. Angie's parents became more and more worried and insecure. They and their friends started searching the area along her route from the bus stop to their home. As the sun began to set and darkness fell, they didn't give up. Realizing Angie was unlikely to wander off in the cold weather, the parents eventually decided to call the police. The police immediately joined the search for Angie. Due to the cold weather, it seemed unlikely that she would wander off alone. Therefore, the police initially focused on investigating whether she had been kidnapped. 10 days before Angie went missing, an 11-year-old girl was almost kidnapped in a nearby area, which made everyone even more concerned. An unknown person approached the girl as she got off the school bus and attempted to pull her into the bushes. Fortunately, she managed to escape. However, since the assailant was still at large, the police believed he might be linked to Angie's disappearance. To investigate, officers deployed K-9 units, which detected Angie's scent near the bus stop. The dogs tracked the scent about halfway to her house, but lost it suddenly, suggesting that Angie might have gotten into a vehicle at that location, which further supported the possibility of an abduction. The police expanded their search for Angie by deploying helicopters with thermal sensors and scouring the banks of a nearby stream, but they failed to locate either the girl or her belongings. The first day, the search turned up no results. As the investigation unfolded, the police released information about Angie's disappearance to the media, which quickly spread throughout the city. The police department receiving over 300 calls within 24 hours. To manage the influx of leads, more than 20 additional officers were assigned to the case. However, none of these clues were helpful in finding Angie. The detectives pursued every lead, with a strong focus on Angie's stepfather from the beginning. Despite this, he insisted he was innocent and willingly cooperated with the investigation, even agreeing to take a lie detector test in an effort to clear his name and help the police focus on finding Angie. During the investigation into Angie's biological father, a new piece of information came to light. Although he had never been in direct contact with his daughter, but the biological father had allegedly driven past her house multiple times to watch her play outside, according to Angie's mother. While detectives found this behavior suspicious, the biological father had a solid alibi that checked out. By the third day, the FBI joined the investigation, and the police department allocated even more officers to the case. It was clear to everyone that something serious had happened to Angie, as she could barely survive on the streets in such harsh weather conditions. A break in the case came when a witness in Angie's neighborhood reported seeing a suspicious man driving a blue sedan. The description matched a person who had attempted to abduct a girl just 10 days earlier. Based on this, investigators created a composite sketch, which was featured in the media and appearing on thousands of distributed flyers. Unfortunately, the identity of the suspect remained a mystery. As Angie's disappearance gained national attention through television, the number of leads increased. Police carefully evaluated each one but found no connections to the case. However, as the case drew more public attention, psychics started contacting Angie's family, claiming to have had visions of the missing girl. One psychic even named a specific location, a large national park 25 miles from Angie's home, where they believed she was being held. However, detectives chose not to pursue this information. To encourage tips, a $10,000 reward was offered for any information about Angie's location, resulting in an influx of tips. During the investigation, detectives discovered a disturbing detail. A few days before she disappeared, Angie mentioned to her teacher that she would be going on a nature trip with her uncle. However, this statement raised red flags, as Angie did not actually have an uncle, and her parents were unaware of what she meant by this claim. Detectives considered the possibility that Angie might have known the person who took her, referring to them as her uncle in conversation. Despite their efforts, investigators failed to uncover any information about this mysterious individual in the days that followed. The case seemed to be at a standstill until 9 days after Angie's disappearance, on November 27th. A young girl's body was discovered near a tree, severely mistreated. She had no clothing on and was bound with handcuffs. Her head was completely covered in tape, except for a small exposed area around her nose. A nearby bag contained personal items, including notebooks with her name, that confirmed the body was that of Angie. Autopsies by medical examiners revealed more disturbing details about Angie's death. A piece of underwear was found stuffed in her mouth after the tape on her head was removed. The investigation determined that she had died just hours before her discovery and had likely been held captive for 9 days before succumbing. Furthermore, experts concluded that Angie suffered numerous physical injuries and endured a sexual assault. A thorough examination of the crime scene by forensic experts led to the discovery of a fingerprint on the tape used to cover Angie's head. The police tried to find matching information in the database and between several suspects, but didn't bring any clues. Following the discovery of the body, the police increased their efforts in the investigation. As news of the tragic incident spread, local residents became fearful, increasing their vigilance. To protect their children, they started escorting them to and from school, meeting them at bus stops, and keeping a close watch over them at all times. On December 1st, a 10-year-old girl named Casey Dissa went missing in a nearby town, just 10 miles from Angie's house. Casey had received permission from her mother to visit friends who lived a short distance away. But she never made it to their home. The police were unsuccessful in locating her, fueling the detectives' fear that they might be dealing with a serial killer. Initially, detectives did not rule out the possibility that the same person was responsible for both Angie's and Casey's disappearances. However, they lacked evidence to support this theory. 10 days later, Casey's body was found in St. Louis, wrapped in bedding in the curtain. The cause of death was determined to be severe head trauma from multiple blows. Despite the investigation, detectives were unable to uncover any leads pointing to the killer. Furthermore, the distinct nature of the two crimes led them to reconsider their initial theory. As a result, they began to consider the possibility of two separate murderers in the same month. Investigations into Angie's disappearance led detectives to identify a man who had attempted to abduct another girl a few days earlier. The suspect, 37-year-old Gary, frequently traveled to St. Louis for work. Although he became a person of interest in the murders of Angie and Casey, he had a solid alibi for the time they went missing. However, during questioning, Gary admitted to assaulting 4 other girls and was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison. The following February, the case took a new turn. Near where Casey's body was found, investigators found tire tracks that were associated with a pickup truck from a well-known rental car company known for its distinctive logo. Detectives showed photos of the tire tracks to locals, asking if they had seen a pickup truck from that company in the area. The detectives received a crucial lead. One woman came forward, saying she had seen such a pickup near her neighbor's house about a week after Casey's disappearance. After investigation, the police discovered that the house belonged to a woman living with her husband and brother. She claimed none of them had rented the pickup and maintained they were not connected to the case. However, detectives remained skeptical and obtained a search warrant for the house. The search revealed blood matching Casey's in the basement, along with the murder weapon. A further investigation uncovered key information in Casey's case. The pickup truck used to transport the body was rented by Thomas, the brother of the woman who owned the house. Initially, Thomas denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with the existing evidence, he eventually confessed. According to Thomas's statement, Casey knocked on his door and wanted to invite his nephews to come out with her. Thomas invited Casey into the house and led her to the basement, where he attempted to assault her. When Casey screamed, Thomas hit her with a heavy object, ultimately killing her. He then covered her body with bed sheets. Despite committing the crime, Thomas went to work as usual. Upon returning home, Thomas' sister told him that she had discovered the body in the basement, but she didn't want to know what had happened and asked that it be disposed of quickly. Casey's body remained in the basement for a week because outside, the search was still going on for her. Thomas was too afraid to move Casey's body until the investigation died down. Once the situation became less intense, Thomas rented a pickup truck, transported Casey's body to St. Louis, and abandoned it there. Thomas was eventually convicted of Casey's murder and received a death sentence. However, he died in prison several years later due to illnesses before the sentence could be carried out. During the investigation, Thomas denied any connection to Angie's case, leading detectives to believe that the two cases were not connected. The investigation into Angie's murder stagnated for many months, with the number of leads dwindling over time. Years later, detectives encountered a new obstacle: the expiration of the reward for providing information, which detectives feared would decrease public involvement. However, a local businessman donated $250,000 to incentivize people to come forward with information. This bonus was one of the biggest at the time, generated a large number of tips, but disappointingly, the case remains unsolved. In 2001, a prison inmate named Corey Fox contacted detectives and confessed to over 10 murders, including the murder of Angie Housman. Detectives met with Corey. Then he recounted how he and an accomplice abducted Angie from the street and held her captive in his house for several days. Initially, the plan was to demand a ransom in exchange for Angie's safe return. However, Corey and his accomplice became concerned that they might be identified and decided to murder her. Corey provided detectives with many accurate details about the crime, including the fact that Angie was tied to a tree and that his accomplice used her underwear as a gag. However, some discrepancies arose during the questioning, particularly with regards to how Angie was restrained. Corey claimed that they used plastic handcuffs, but evidence showed that perpetrator actually used iron handcuffs. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Corey could not have committed some of the murders he confessed to. As a result, police concluded that he likely fabricated parts of his confession, possibly drawing information from media of Angie's case. In the summer of 2002, when a 6-year-old girl was abducted from her home and murdered in a different St. Louis neighborhood, authorities initially considered whether the two crimes were connected, but this theory proved unfounded. The killer, a neighbor, was quickly caught and confessed during questioning. The investigation into Angie's case lay dormant for several years, until 2007, when detectives reopened the file. Upon reviewing the case documents, they stumbled upon a noteworthy detail. Shortly after Angie's body was discovered, police had found a man named Roger Martin sitting in a parked car nearby. When questioned about his emergence, Roger claimed he was in the area to go hunting. However, a search of his vehicle revealed no hunting equipment, raising suspicions about his true intentions. The new detective team decided to investigate Roger further, which revealed his prior convictions for crimes against children. Notably, one of his past victims was assaulted near the area where Angie's body was discovered. All of these crimes happened before Angie's death, but the police had failed to thoroughly look into Roger at the time. This meant that the new team had to start over from the beginning. The detectives brought Roger in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in Angie's murder. He claimed that he just happened to be near that location. The interrogation lasted 9 hours, but still yielded no new clues. The police compared Roger's fingerprints with the ones on the tape found on Angie's head, but the experts found that they did not match. As a result, Roger was released. Although the police continued to consider him a suspect, they lacked sufficient evidence to hold him. The case of Angie saw a breakthrough in 2018, when the St. Louis Police Department created a task force specifically to investigate this case. With the advancement of technology, the detectives re-examined the existing evidence, searching for new leads. Their investigation centered on 3 crucial pieces of evidence: the handcuffs, the tape from Angie's head, and her underwear used as a gag. Despite repeated efforts since 1993, experts had struggled to detect the perpetrator's DNA on these items. The task force decided to re-examine the evidence with modern technology. The detectives first focused on the handcuffs but encountered a difficulty due to the presence of Angie's blood covering almost the entire surface. Next, they turned their attention to the tape from Angie's head, but faced another obstacle. Upon opening the box containing the evidence, they discovered that the tape had deteriorated significantly over time. Finally, they examined the underwear that had been used to gag Angie. Although they did not have much hope for this evidence, since it had been in her mouth for hours, so it was likely that any foreign DNA had been removed. However, they still investigated it as a last resort. Using advanced technology, they carefully examined every inch of the underwear, leading to a breakthrough. A small sample of DNA was found, sufficient for analysis. The experts confirmed the DNA belonged to a male and immediately uploaded it to the FBI database. Although it is common for DNA searches to yield no matches, requiring additional investigation, the detectives were fortunate in this case. As soon as the DNA sample was uploaded, they received a full match. The DNA belonged to 58-year-old Earl Cox, who had been incarcerated since 2003. In the investigation into Angie's case, Earl Cox initially had not been on the police's radar, but his criminal record was substantial. His history of crime dated back to 1982, when he was serving in the military in Germany and working as a part-time babysitter for girls reported being sexually assaulted by Earl, resulting in an 8-year prison sentence in the United States. He was subsequently discharged from the Army after serving only 3 years. Earl was released from prison early and moved to St. Louis. However, 4 years later, he found himself in trouble with the law again. In this instance, he was arrested after two 7-year-old girls accused him of sexually assaulting them. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, the arrest itself was a parole violation. As a result, Earl received an additional year in prison. After serving this extra year, Earl was released in 1992 and settled in St. Louis, where his relatives lived. The following year, a tragic incident happened. Earl abducted and killed Angie. In 2002, Earl was arrested again for operating a secret online platform where individuals shared child abuse content. The FBI had been monitoring his activities and set a trap by having an undercover agent pose as a 14-year-old girl and make contact with him. Earl made explicit intentions to exploit the girl and sent money for her to meet him. However, when Earl showed up at the meeting place, he was met by armed FBI agents instead of the girl. This led to his arrest. A search of his computer revealed a massive collection of over 45,000 images of child abuse. Further investigation also revealed that Earl was the mastermind behind the platform, leading to the arrest of 60 more individuals associated with the site. This operation was one of the largest against pedophiles in the country. In 2003, Earl was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, when his sentence ended, a judge used a legal loophole to keep Earl in detention, citing him as a serious threat to children. As a result, Earl remained in prison. In 2019, a DNA match linked Earl to Angie Housman's case. Detectives visited him in prison, but Earl denied involvement and requested a lawyer. Despite the strong DNA evidence, investigators took an alternative approach. They offered Earl's lawyer a deal. In exchange for Earl's confession, the prosecution would drop the death penalty and pursue a life sentence instead. Earl agreed, likely aware that he would lose the case in court. When detectives returned to the prison, Earl shared his account of incident. Although some details raised suspicions, his admission to the murder was the key point for investigators. Earl claimed that on November 18, 1993, he was driving through his family's neighborhood when his car broke down. And while he was trying to find out what was wrong with the car, a school bus pulled up and children disembarked. While the others went home, Angie remained outside, drawing Earl's attention. Earl claimed that when Angie approached him, they had a brief chat, and he noticed she seemed extremely cold. He offered her a ride in his car, which she allegedly accepted. Earl then took Angie to Burger King to get food, and afterwards, took her to his home. Here, he sexually assaulted her for several days. Eventually, Earl decided to dispose of Angie, drove her to a remote location, where her body was later found, and tied her to a tree. However, she was still alive at that time. Detectives had doubts about certain parts of Earl's story. They didn't think Angie would agree to go anywhere with a stranger, especially since she only had a short distance to walk home. Investigators have questioned Earl's story about the car breakdown, as he claimed the car stalled but started again as soon as Angie approached. It seems more likely that Earl saw Angie and decided to abduct her. A more probable scenario is that he lured her into the car by lying or threatening her. This is more credible than his confession. Detectives were to obtain the confession they needed for the murder. Earl Cox was sentenced to life in prison without parole by a judge in August 2020. Although justice had been served, it came too late for Angie's mother, who had passed away from cancer in 2016. Her husband, Ronald, felt that Cox's actions had indirectly contributed to her death. As her grief over losing Angie had weakened her health and will to live, ultimately leading to her passing. For Earl, his sentence was more than just the initial verdict. Authorities re-examined a previous case of sexual abuse involving two 7-year-old girls, for which Earl had initially received a lenient sentence. At that time, he had only spent 1 year in prison for violating his parole. However, years later, investigators contacted one of his victims, now an adult, and asked for her testimony against him. Faced with the of a life sentence, Earl chose to plead guilty and as a result, received an additional 10-year prison sentence. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Deborah Newell. Deborah Newell was a highly successful and affluent woman who had built her fortune through hard work and dedication in the interior design industry. After years of climbing the ranks, she founded her own design firm, Ambrosia, where she spent 3 decades pursuing her passion. Regardless her professional success, her personal life was a different story. She had been married 4 times, but each union ended in divorce. While she was a devoted mother to her 4 children, but her with an intense desire for a happier home life. A few years ago, her family experienced a tragedy. Her sister, Cindy, was brutally murdered by her husband, Billy Vickers, in March 1984. What's more heartbreaking is that their mother testified against Cindy and supported Billy throughout the trial. As a result, Billy spent only a few years in prison for his heinous crime. Deborah was deeply affected by the tragedy, leaving her with anxiety and lingering fear of guns. Despite being encouraged by friends to purchase a pistol for protection, she was unable to bear the thought of having a gun near her, and she lived alone for a long time. Deborah prioritized her physical appearance and lifestyle. She invested significant time and money in skin care, makeup, and hair, and surrounded herself with luxurious items from brands like Chanel, Cartier, Denam, and Gucci. Despite her beautiful life, Deborah felt incomplete without a loving partner. John Meehan was born on February 3, 1958, in California. He grew up with his sisters, Karen and Donna. John's life was influenced by his father, who taught him dishonest ways. This led John to get involved in scams, deal with illegal substances, and often have run-ins with the law, ultimately forcing him to leave California in 1988. After completing his undergraduate studies at Arizona State University with a Bachelor of Arts degree, John went on to join the law faculty at the University of Dayton. His striking looks, 6 feet and 3 inches, with hazel green eyes and dark hair, earned him the nickname Dirty John from his friends. He possessed a natural charm that effortlessly attracted women. After John finished his academic journey, he met Tanya Sells, a nurse anesthetist, and they got married in November 1990. Tanya was 25 years old, and John was 31. However, their relationship was built on lies, and John kept his family away from Tanya, telling her they were bad people. Tanya supported John's education as an anesthesiologist while attending medical school in Tennessee. She also helped him get his license to practice anesthesiology. The couple had 2 children, but their marriage began to fall apart over time. Tanya eventually discovered the truth about John's past from his mother and sisters. She also found out that John had been stealing pills from his patients and was addicted to them, which explained his cause of his short temper. Tanya immediately reported John to the police. After an investigation, John admitted his wrongdoing, but instead of surrendering, he left the state and went into hiding at a hotel in Michigan. However, the police found John easily and discovered him unconscious in his hotel room, surrounded by empty pill containers. An ambulance was called, but on the way to the hospital, John woke up, grabbed a medication, and jumped out of the ambulance. He was caught again and eventually sentenced to 6 years in prison in Michigan for resisting arrest and possessing illegal drugs. John spent just 17 months in prison. Then, his sentence was reduced and he was released in 2004. During this time, he met Deborah through online dating. John, then 55, and Deborah, then 59, had both decided to give online dating a try. Deborah was immediately drawn to John's profile, which pretended he was a divorced doctor and a Christian looking for love. Despite having a string of unsuccessful dates, Deborah was delighted to meet John in person. He showed genuine interest in her life and accomplishments, which made her feel appreciated. This was a refreshing change for Deborah, who had been disappointed by her previous dating experiences. John and Deborah's first date took place at a restaurant in Irvine, California, in October 2014. John's aim was to make a great impression on Deborah, which he achieved by sharing false stories about his past. He told her that he had worked with Doctors Without Borders in Iraq, had 2 children, and owned multiple properties. Deborah was captivated by the image of a selfless doctor who had dedicated his life to helping others. John treated Deborah with kindness and respect, making her feel like a queen. This was exactly what Deborah had been longing for, genuine affection. John's charming words left Deborah smitten, and she invited him to her penthouse after dinner. However, John crossed the line this time. After a few kisses, he tried to get intimate with Deborah, but she didn't feel comfortable, so she asked him to leave. The next morning, John apologized profusely, attributing his behavior to too much alcohol and an inability to control his emotions. This admission won back Deborah's trust, and their relationship continued to blossom. As their love progresses, Deborah and John spent more time together. On their third date, he expressed his love for Deborah and proposed to her. She was thrilled with their connection and chose to overlook some red flags. One notable instance was when John wore worn and somewhat unclean medical scrubs to a charity event hosted by Deborah, claiming he hadn't had time to change. Despite this, Deborah proudly introduced him to her friends as her doctor, and they took photos together. Their connection deepened, and they eventually decided to move in together. Deborah's daughter Jason lived with her in the penthouse. Jason was unhappy with the men her mother was dating, and in particular, she had concerns about John. Jason found it unusual that her mother, who had impeccable taste and favored designer brands like Gucci, was in a relationship with someone who wore dirty, unkempt clothing. Jason noticed him showing curiosity about the artwork in her mother's apartment, almost as if he was determining its value. After only meeting for 5 weeks, John convinced Deborah that they should live separately, and they rented a house on Balboa Island's waterfront for $6,500 per month. Deborah paid $80,000 upfront to cover several months of rent. However, John opted not to put his name on the lease, citing tax complications as the reason. Deborah was deeply smitten with John and took care of all the expenses, covering everything herself. Unbeknownst to her children, she couldn't understand why they didn't approve of he. John shows Deborah concern for her by making her coffee every morning, helping her with shopping, and generally making her life simpler. Deborah believed that she had finally found her ideal partner and was hopeful that her children would accept him. She envisioned a future where they all came together as a harmonious family. Then, Deborah intended to introduce John to her younger daughter, Tara, who was known for being more laid-back and easygoing compared to Jason. Tara visited her mother, Deborah, and John on the day they moved into their new home. Upon meeting he for the first time, Tara felt uneasy due to his unfriendly behavior and lack of enthusiasm for the move. Despite Tara's initial doubts, she decided to give him a chance. However, her worries about John increased due to some suspicious signs. For example, John claimed to own homes in Newport Beach and Palm Springs, but he never discussed them going there to visit or moving there. He also didn't own a car. What's more, he spent most of his days at home, often playing video games. Just before Thanksgiving, Tara decided to secretly go through John's belongings and stumbled upon a nurse's certificate with his name on it. Realizing that John is not the doctor he said he was, Tara confronted him about this. This led to a huge outburst from John, who became angry and began yelling at Tara for trying to ruin her mother's happiness. He insists that Tara will fail to separate them. Deborah just stood there, listening, and eventually, a big argument broke out and ended with Tara leaving the house. John took advantage of the situation to manipulate Deborah into believing that her children were only interested in her wealth and were waiting for her to pass away, thus they not wanting her to be happy. On the eve of Thanksgiving, Deborah's extremely religious mother, Arlene, visited. However, John's attempt to present himself as a religious man in front of Arlene backfires and leads to more arguments. Following this incident, Deborah sought the advice of a psychotherapist. They have advised her to set boundaries with her children and strive for a peaceful life, advice that she chose to follow. Deborah and John moved to Balboa Island, where they enjoyed dining at local restaurants and taking leisurely strolls while admiring the beautiful scenery. Although Deborah was incredibly happy, but she was still worried about John's choice of outfit. His wardrobe consisted mainly of old medical scrubs, loose-fitting and frayed pants, and worn-out shirts. Deborah, on the other hand, wanted he to dress fashionably and complement her lifestyle. He attributed his lack of finer clothes to having them stolen during his time in Iraq. To address this issue, she took John shopping and bought him a complete set of high-end designer outfits. In early December, John went with Deborah on a work-related trip to Las Vegas, where they made the sudden decision to get married after knowing each other for less than 2 months. Deborah chose not to tell her children about this development. Around that time, a mysterious woman managed to get into John and Deborah's home. He used this incident to convince Deborah that they needed better security. He then set up several surveillance cameras around the house that he could control with his smartphone. He even put cameras in Deborah's office, where he could keep an eye on her activities. John's goal was to have complete control over Deborah. As time went on, Deborah started asking John about his family and life before they met. Every time she asked, he came up with a quick excuse or justification, even though his answers didn't quite add up. Deborah dismissed her doubts, thinking she had found the perfect partner. However, her children, especially Jason, were still wary of John. Since he didn't own a car, John used Deborah's, which led Tara and Jacelyn to investigate his activities. They installed a tracking device on John's car to monitor his movements. When this yielded no results, they decided to hire a private investigator to investigate further. The investigators' findings were shocking. John had filed for bankruptcy, held a nursing license but not a medical license, and had lived in multiple states, including Arizona, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and California. Furthermore, he had been in the Orange County Jail. When Tara and Jason shared these things with their mother, Deborah, she remained unwavering, stating that her love for John would not change, even if the things were true. In late March, Deborah received a letter meant for John. The letter was from a former prison inmate, but before she could read it, he hastily took it from her. Initially, he was very angry, accusing her of not trusting him. He later claimed that the letter was from a friend he was providing emotional support to. Deborah was uneasy about John's explanation, and her concerns grew. The day after discovering lies, when John's left for work, and she decided to search through his belongings. This search revealed shocking truths about he. She found out that he was a former nurse anesthetist who had become addicted to pain medication, which led to his arrest and the downfall of his career. What's more disturbing is that Deborah discovers that he is a scammer and has been stealing from women he meets online. As Deborah searched further, she found court records showing that John had a search warrant issued for his storage unit. When authorities searched the unit, they found a handgun, bullets, a GPS tracker, syringes, and other suspicious items. This information was alarming. But what caught Deborah's attention was that he had multiple restraining orders against him from different women. The most unsettling fact, however, was that John had been released from prison on October 8th and had met Deborah just days later. Too overwhelmed by these facts, Deborah felt a mix of shock and fear. She realized that John was a violent felon who posed a big threat to her and her children. Despite the danger, Deborah decided to calm and waited for the right moment to take action. When John left for the hospital due to back problems, Deborah seized the opportunity. With her family's help, she quickly moved out of the house while he was away. During the process of packing John's belongings, Deborah discovered some disturbing documents, online comments from other women warning about John's manipulative nature. These comments described him as a skilled deceiver who used his charm and good looks to manipulate others. Convinced that John was unstable, Deborah decided to end their relationship and leave. However, John continued to message her, apologizing and asking her to visit him in the hospital. Feeling guilty, she eventually gave in to his requests. By June 2015, he had managed to persuade Deborah to reconcile with him. He offers a defense about the objects she found and confesses to hiding his past, believing she wouldn't care about it if he were honest. He admitted to lying about being a doctor to impress her and now begged for her help to turn his life around. Deborah decided to give her husband another chance and they moved to a new apartment in Irvine. However, her children were unhappy about the decision and did not want to see her. As a result, Deborah and John temporarily kept a distance from the children. In March 2016, Deborah had been trying to help John overcome his addiction for over a year, during which they had been married. Unfortunately, Deborah's entire family, particularly her daughter Jason, disliked John, and he doesn't like Jason either. The tension between them had grown so severe that John prohibited Deborah from seeing Jason. To make matters worse, John contacted Jason's real estate school, slandering her in front of the teachers. He also sent Jason threatening and vulgar messages, telling her that her mother didn't want anything to do with her. Although he appears to be recovering from rehab, the more cruel and aggressive he became. By April 2016, Deborah finally reached the limit of her tolerance. She wanted to end her relationship peacefully, so she started withdrawing money from her bank account to protect it. $30,000 was hidden in a lower drawer in her home. When John discovered the money, he claimed it belonged to him. And his behavior became increasingly aggressive as he had to accept the fact that their marriage would end in divorce. Realizing she needed to escape, Deborah took some personal items and moved to her friend Jacqueline's apartment in Irvine, which had a secure complex with multiple surveillance cameras. She attempted to obtain a restraining order but was denied by an Orange County judge. John lived in another state and was doing no harm, so all she could do was end the relationship and try to move on. After they separated, John moved to one of Deborah's house in Nevada. Despite her ignoring his calls, he persisted in contacting her. On June 11, 2016, John made another move, aimed at getting Deborah's attention. That day, Deborah drove her Jaguar to work and parked it in the office parking lot. During her work hours, the car was stolen. It was later found about a block and a half away, drenched in gasoline. The car had not been set on fire, it sustained minor damage. Security footage clearly identified John as the perpetrator of the theft. On the evening of August 20, 2016, Tara returned home from work and parked her car in the lot. As she stepped out of the vehicle, she was suddenly confronted by John, who approached her with a knife. He attempted to drag her back into the car, but Tara resisted and screamed for help. In the ensuing struggle, John tried to cover her mouth. But she managed to bite him. Tara, wearing heavy boots, used her leverage to kick John and knock the knife out of his hand. Seizing the opportunity, she picked up the knife and stabbed John multiple times, inflicting a total of 13 wounds. Her final strike was particularly severe, as it pierced his eye. A neighbor witnessed the struggle and rushed to Tara's aid, providing her with a towel to treat her injuries and calling the police. Despite his severe injuries, John was still alive when the paramedics arrived. A search of his car revealed evidence of his sinister intentions, including duct tape, cable ties, kitchen knives, and a passport, suggesting that he had planned to abduct Tara and escape the city with her as a hostage. John was hospitalized for 4 days to receive critical care, but unfortunately, his injuries were fatal and he passed away at the age of 57. After his death, his body was cremated and a memorial service was not held. Deborah and her children were severely affected by this. It took a while for Deborah to readjust to her normal life, but the memory still haunts her. She struggles with feelings of guilt for introducing a criminal into her family's life. As a result, Deborah has become extremely vigilant about her safety, carrying a stun gun and pepper spray with her at all times. She has vowed never to meet anyone online again. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jasmine Richardson. The Richardson family was widely admired for their friendly and hospitable personalities, which made everyone feel at home. Deborah, Mark, and their children, Tyler and Jasmine, lived in a cozy home. Their home is frequented by friends, and the family atmosphere is built on the principles of love and respect. However, things took a turn when Jasmine, their 12-year-old daughter, entered puberty. From a calm and obedient girl, she grew into a confident but also impulsive young woman. This new personality led to frequent conflicts with her parents and her academic performance started to decline. Jasmine's interests changed in a big way. She switched from listening to modern pop music to heavy rock. In addition, her fashion style is no longer the same as before. Gone were the bright colors and cheerful clothing. Instead, she opted for a darker, more somber style that was often provocative. It was clear that Jasmine was trying to attract the attention of boys and she began to accentuate the curves of her body. Her interaction with friends noticeably decreased as she began spending more time alone in her room, often with the door closed, glued to her computer screen. After the internet became available at home, her interests shifted to exploring Gothic themes, reading dark poetry, learning about criminal psychology, and studying human anatomy. She also became fascinated with criminal psychology and the Wiccan religion, referring to herself as a witch. She connected with like-minded individuals through websites focused on similar interests, forming a community of friends who shared her passions. Her social media page featured the greeting, "Welcome to my tragic world." Jasmine's behavior, initially thought to be a sign of puberty, but late became more concerning as she began to distance herself from her family. She created a fictional online persona, gave herself a different name, age, and began seeking relationships with people much older than her. Her parents tried their best to support her during this difficult period, suggesting that they spend time together by participating in common activities. However, Jasmine found these suggestions uninteresting. Her relationship with her younger brother deteriorated as she started speaking to him less frequently, viewing him as an annoyance. In stark contrast, she spends hours talking to strangers on social media, building other relationships, to make up for her lackluster relationships with family and friends. Deborah and Mark were aware that their daughter's new hobbies were likely a temporary phase of her youth. As a result, they were patient and allowed her to explore her interests. When Jasmine asked to attend a punk rock concert, her parents agreed. If only they had known the consequences that would follow this outing. In early 2006, Jasmine attended a local concert by a youth band that shared her interests. She also knew that Jeremy Steinke, a boy who had caught her attention for months, would be there. They had met online through a website for vampire enthusiasts and occasionally communicated with each other. Jeremy created an online persona as a 30-year-old werewolf who craved blood. To support this claim, he wore a vial of blood around his neck, but the origin of the fluid was unknown. Despite his ambiguity, he seems to believe he is unique, a quality Jasmine finds appealing and interesting. Jeremy and Jasmine connection deepened after meeting at a concert. Jeremy, however, was 23 years old, and the duo knew her parents would not approve of their relationship due to their significant age difference. As a result, they decided to keep their romance a secret. Complications in Jeremy's life were made worse by problems he had experienced earlier. He struggled financially and resided in a trailer with his mother and sister. His relationship with his mother was strained, largely because of her heavy drinking. This often led to violent arguments with some of her hot-tempered partners, who often abused Jeremy in drunken fits. By the age of 13, Jeremy was struggling academically and had mental health issues due to a troubled home life. He became so overwhelmed that he tried to hang himself, but fortunately, someone intervened in time. He was later diagnosed with depression and hyperactivity. Due to the relentless bullying he faced at school, Jeremy decided to stop attending. As Jeremy navigated the dark period of his life, he developed a passion for the concept of live immortally and began exploring online forums, where like-minded people shared thoughts and ideas. His online profile was filled with morbid topics, including self-harm, pain, and violence. Unbeknownst to their families, Jeremy had started a dating relationship with Jasmine. Their friends were aware of the relationship, but they found it strange due to the large age gap. Everything remained a secret until Jasmine's parents, Deborah and Mark, discovered her excessive internet use and decided to monitor her online activity. What they found alarmed them. Jasmine was in contact with strangers, including Jeremy. He is someone with a suspicious online identity. His nickname, Soul Eater, and interests in dark themes raised concerns, leading Jasmine's parents to intervene and restrict her access to the computer. They were shocked to learn that Jasmine was in a dating relationship with Jeremy, making it clear to them that this relationship was not acceptable under any circumstances. Deborah and Mark took their daughter Jasmine to see a psychologist, hoping she would get the help she needed to escape her toxic relationship. The counseling sessions greatly improved their parent-child relationship, and Jasmine appeared to be returning to a normal life, claiming the past was behind her. She regained access to her computer. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a wrong decision and proved fatal for Jasmine's family. On the evening of Saturday, April 22, 2006, as the family prepared for bed, Deborah heard a noise in the basement and went to investigate. She initially thought the noise might be rats but discovered a person wearing a ski mask instead. The masked man stood opposite Deborah, and her first reaction was to scream. The stranger attempted to silence her by covering her mouth but was unsuccessful, prompting Deborah to scream even louder. The assailant then stabbed Deborah in the chest with a knife, twice. Mark, hearing his wife's desperate cries for help, rushed down to the basement. He was met with a horrific scene. His wife lay in a pool of blood, with the attacker standing nearby. Mark quickly responded by attacking the intruder. However, he was stabbed in the stomach and sustained additional stab wounds. As Mark's pain began to subside and he was losing consciousness, he quietly asked the attacker why he did that. The attacker coldly replied that it was because Mark's daughter had wanted it that way. Upstairs, Tyler was left alone and scared as the attacker approached. Tyler was still in his pajamas and was paralyzed with fear. The footsteps grew louder and the bedroom door opened. Just a few days before the murder, Jasmine was happy since her parents had forgiven her, allowing her to reconnect with them. Mobile phones weren't widely used at that time, so Jasmine used the computer to communicate with the outside world. As soon as she regained internet access, she immediately contacted Jeremy. She told Jeremy, "Everyone will think you and I are crazy, but there's one way we can be together, if my parents disappear." However, what Jasmine didn't reveal to her parents was that she was secretly forming a plan to kill them while she was receiving therapy sessions. She shared this plan with Jeremy. He found the idea appealing, but he stressed that everything needed to be carefully, meticulously planned and that attention to detail was required. Jasmine realized that as long as her parents were alive, she would never be able to be with Jeremy. During this time, Jasmine's friends noticed that she often complained about her parents. expressing her annoyance towards them. What they don't realize is that Jasmine's resentment eventually leads her to want to end her parents' lives. Despite her frequent comments about killing her parents, but her friends considered it just a funny joke. Garrett crossed the street to his friend Tyler's house on Saturday, April 22nd, in 2:06. He was excited to play, as the weather was pleasant. When he arrived at the Tyler's house, he noticed that the blinds were still closed, which seemed unusual. Even more unusual was that no one came to the door when he knocked. This surprised Garrett, as the Mark Best car was parked in the driveway. Curious and hoping to find someone, Garrett peeked through the living room window but didn't see anyone. He then walked to the back of the house, towards the basement area where he often played with Tyler. As he looked through the window, he saw something strange on the floor, what appeared to be two people lying in a pool of blood. This disturbing discovery prompted Garrett to inform his mother. Garrett's mother seemed suspicious at first but decided to check on Tyler's family. They approached the house together, and Garrett pointed to the window he had looked through earlier. The woman peeked inside and was met with a horrific sight, immediately prompting her to call emergency services. "There's been an incident at the Jasmine's house," she reported. The police swiftly arrived at the scene and forcibly entered the house through the front door. They then proceeded to the basement. Due to the severity of their injuries and the large amount of blood, the police initially struggled to identify the bodies. However, despite the difficulties, they were eventually able to confirm that the victims were Mark and Deborah, and tragically, they had lost their lives. The crime scene was exceptionally horrific, with blood splatters covering the floor, walls, and ceiling. Later, during a thorough search of the house, the police found a young child in the upstairs bedroom. The boy was lying in bed, surrounded by toys also splattered with blood, and had visible knife wounds. A young boy's throat had been severely cut. As police searched the house, they realized that the Mark and Deborah's eldest daughter, Jasmine, was missing. This raised concerns for her safety. Initial investigations suggested that the attack occurred in the basement and the child's room, with the rest of the house appearing untouched. The condition of the boy's body indicated that the crime likely took place the previous night. It seemed that the perpetrator had broken into the house and attacked the boy and his parents. But what had happened to Jasmine, and where was she? The police developed several theories to explain her disappearance. One possibility was that she had managed to escape and was somewhere safe. Another possibility was that the perpetrator had taken her and was harming her. However, as the investigation continued, no clear answers emerged. Detectives turned to the media for assistance in locating the missing girl. Jasmine, hoping she would reach out or someone would come forward with valuable information. The investigation into the crime continued. Investigators interviewed relatives and friends of Mark's family and their colleagues to gather more detailed information about their lives. They sought to determine if the family had any enemies who could be capable of such a heinous act. However, upon further investigation, they learned that Mark's family was well loved and had no enemies. They were a loving family with a strong marriage and positive relationships with their children, except for one exception, their eldest daughter, Jasmine, who had been causing trouble lately. As a result, the media announcements shifted focus. The investigation now sought to locate the eldest daughter, Jasmine, a very suspicious person. The girl may have information about the case or might have been involved in it. Under Canadian law, which prohibits publishing the names of minors, so news outlets started referring to Jasmine Richardson as JR because she was underage at the time. After news of her relationship with Jeremy spread, this couple has become a wanted person by the police. The police initially focused on their friends and acquaintances. However, this line of investigation was ultimately unsuccessful, and the investigation reached a dead end. Police investigation revealed some new information. A few hours after the crime, Jasmine and Jeremy were seen at a restaurant and a party hosted by a friend. A friend noticed that Jasmine was fine, showing no signs of distress or trauma, and she continued to socialize, drink, and have fun. When friends asked how they managed to escape from her parents, Jasmine laughed and replied in a light-hearted manner. Jeremy and she took care of them. However, Jeremy's tone took a darker turn when he nodded in agreement, and then he added that he had cut them up like fish, implying a violent act had occurred. Jasmine's laughter downplayed the severity of the situation, making it seem less significant. The party guests burst out laughing, thinking that the remark was a sick joke. However, they did not realize that it was actually true. The guests' amusement was also verified by a comedian who was present. The police found a detailed plan in Jasmine's school locker, revealing her intentions to harm her family members with the help of her boyfriend. The photos of the suspects were widely circulated, and it is likely that they will be caught soon, as someone is expected to come forward with information about their whereabouts. Eventually, police received a tip and found Jasmine and Jeremy in Leader, Saskatchewan, about 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. They were found sleeping in a pickup truck and were taken into custody without a struggle. Jasmine and her boyfriend, Jeremy, were questioned individually, with Jasmine being interviewed first. She told investigators that she and Jeremy were deeply in love and that he reciprocated her feelings. However, their relationship was impacted by two main issues: a large age gap and disparate social status. Jasmine claimed that her parents would never have approved of their relationship. According to Jasmine, Jeremy ended the lives of her parents so that they could be together. When detectives inquired about her involvement in the crime, Jasmine denied being present at the time it occurred and stated she had no prior knowledge of the event. After she found out what had happened, she decided to run away with him because her love for Jeremy was so great. Detectives needed to identify the mastermind behind the plot. To get the suspect to cooperate, investigators came up with a clever tactic. They placed an undercover informant in Jeremy's cell, who successfully extracted information from him that contradicted Jasmine's claims. According to Jeremy, the plan to kill Jasmine's parents was actually she's idea. Jeremy was initially hesitant about going along with the plan. However, after realizing his own feelings for Jasmine, he agreed to it. Additionally, Jasmine's parents confiscating her computer as punishment also influenced his decision. Jeremy confessed to the informant. He took care of she parents, Deborah and Mark, while Jasmine took care of her younger brother, Tyler. Jeremy reveals that she desperately begged him to spare Tyler and come to her, and he was happy to get revenge on them all. Following Jeremy's confession, investigators questioned Jasmine using the recorded conversation between them and he as evidence, which left her no choice but to reveal every detail of the crime. She admitted that she stabbed her younger brother, Tyler, stating she didn't want to leave him behind as an orphan. In the following investigation, Jasmine and Jeremy voluntarily shared their social media profiles and passwords. By doing this, investigators were able to look at their private conversations and found thousands of messages that backed up Jeremy's previous claims. It became clear that Jasmine was indeed the mastermind behind the plan. Further investigation also uncovered a disturbing dynamic between Jasmine and Jeremy. Jeremy wrote that Jasmine was the only person who accepted and supported his unusual tastes, helping to alleviate the feelings of isolation he experienced due to not fitting in with societal norms. Fearing that he would lose her, he agreed to help carry out the horrific plan. One of Jeremy's messages contained a chilling passage, exposing his desire for violence. Jeremy wrote that he wanted revenge on Jasmine's parents and was determined to hold them accountable. His intention was to harm them and eventually make them disappear. Jeremy showed his affection for Jasmine in her time of need. However, his friends revealed a disturbing fact. Hours before the incident, Jeremy and his girlfriend had watched the 1994 film Natural Born Killers. This movie tells the story of a couple who brutally murder 9 people. Jeremy's friends stated that after watching the film, he expressed a desire to reenact a similar scenario with his girlfriend, calling it the best love story of all time. Based on the evidence collected, including witness testimony and the suspect's confessions, Jasmine but Jeremy, detectives were able to reconstruct incidents surrounding the crime. This led to the suspects being charged with 3 homicide counts. Jeremy was intoxicated before the incident. Jasmine allowed him into the house and led him to the basement, where he assaulted Deborah, Jasmine's mother. Deborah received 12 stab wounds, with the most severe wound penetrating 12 centimeters into her chest and damaging her heart, which ultimately caused her death. Jeremy then brutally attacked Mark, Jasmine's father, inflicting 24 wounds, 9 of which were on his back. Mark also bled to death on the basement floor. Meanwhile, upstairs Jasmine stabbed her younger brother Tyler 5 times. Then, Jeremy joined her. He coldly slit the boy's throat. Jeremy returned home to clean the blood off himself, while Jasmine took a taxi to a restaurant where they had agreed to meet. Once reunited, they discussed the incident of the night and then went to a party. Jeremy's friend, Casey Lancaster, helped them dispose of the evidence and evade authorities by fleeing to Saskatchewan. The brutality and gruesomeness of their actions are difficult to put into words. Jeremy and Jasmine committed their heinous crimes with ease and without emotion. What is even more disturbing is that during interrogation and detention, neither of them expressed any regret or remorse for their actions. While they were detained, Jeremy and Jasmine wrote letters to each other, referring to themselves as legendary and immortal. In one of these letters, Jeremy submitted a marriage proposal to Jasmine, on she happily accepted. Jasmine and Jeremy's intense relationship fell apart suddenly. As trial began, they blamed each other for their actions. Jasmine was the first to face trial in June 2007. She entered a not guilty plea, claiming that she was in a trance-like state at the time, which left her unable to intervene or stop Jeremy from killing her family. Jasmine also asserted that she only injured her younger brother, and Jeremy was the one who caused her younger brother's death. She made a statement that her conversations with Jeremy about killing her parents were just hypothetical discussions. But Jeremy took them seriously and pressured her into making them a reality. Jasmine received a 10 years prison sentence for 3 counts of homicide. However, due to Canadian laws regarding juvenile offenders, this was the maximum sentence she could receive as she was under 14 years old at the time of the crime. The primary goal of the sentence was to focus on healing and restoring the girl's mental well-being, rather than punishing her. In a 10-prison sentence, including 4 years in a psychiatric facility. During her stay, doctors diagnosed her with 2 conditions: conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder. Jasmine showed genuine remorse for her actions in the years leading up to her release, which was noted by medical professionals during her community supervision. After serving her full sentence, Jasmine was released from prison in 2016 and has since been living in Canada under a new, protected identity. Her return to society has been met with mixed opinions, with some people supporting her right to a second chance, while others believe her punishment should have been more severe. The community in Medicine Hat has made it clear they do not want her to return. It remains to be seen whether Jasmine has truly changed and grown during her time in detention. Jeremy's trial began in 2008. He claimed that he had not initially intended to harm his girlfriend's parents, Deborah and Mark. However, after being discovered in the basement, he felt forced to attack. Jeremy denied harming Tyler and instead suggested that Jasmine was the one responsible. His defense argued that Jasmine had deliberately manipulated him into committing the crime, as she sought to escape her parents' strict control. Friends of Jeremy stated that he came to them before the crime. He confided in them his fear of losing Jasmine, to the point where he was willing to do anything to prevent it. Jeremy's lawyers asked the court to reduce the charges to manslaughter, suggesting that he was under the influence of substances at the time of the crime. When questioned by the prosecution about his motives, Jeremy gave an inconsistent response. He stated that when someone finds their soulmate, they will do whatever it takes to keep them. Throughout the trial, Jeremy remained largely unemotional, but broke down in tears when his mother, Jacqueline May, testified in his defense. Jacqueline felt guilty about the role she played in his upbringing, during which he was frequently physically and emotionally abused by her partners. In the end, Jeremy was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree homicide and received 3 life sentences. He will be eligible for parole in 25 years, starting in 2033. Casey Lancaster's charges related to being an accomplice in a crime have been dismissed in a Medicine Hat court. However, she was found guilty of obstructing justice. As a result, she received a 1-year sentence of house arrest and was prohibited from using drugs and alcohol during her custody. Everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of William Lewis Reese. William Lewis Reese was born in Oklahoma on July 1, 1959, the youngest of 13 children in his family. He grew up in Yukon and Anadarko. Due to his family's financial struggles, he had to drop out of school in the 9th grade to work as a farm laborer. He married Judy Flaming in 1979 after she became pregnant. After getting married, William joined the Oklahoma National Guard but eventually left. During this time, his marriage began to unravel, and Judy divorced him after just 1 year. However, William convinced Judy to remarry him, and they had another child together. Unfortunately, their marriage problems persisted, and heavy drinking led to physical abuse against Judy, ultimately causing their marriage to end again. Judy filed a complaint against her husband in 1982 after he physically abused her, claiming that he also threatened her life with a knife and a shotgun. As a result, Judy divorced him for the 2nd time. William later remarried to another woman. However, this marriage was also short-lived, as his second wife divorced him just a few months later. And William's string of crimes resumed shortly after. In April 1986, William kidnapped a 19-year-old woman who was the daughter of a Texas sheriff's deputy. The woman's car broke down on her way to the gym. And William, who worked as a truck driver at that time, approached her and offered assistance by promising to take her to the nearest payphone in his truck. Once inside the vehicle, he restrained her and committed a sexual assault. He then drove her to a nearby motel where he reserved a room for the night. When Williams gave her permission to use the bathroom, she took advantage of the chance to break free and phone the police. He then was arrested, charged, and then released after posting bail. However, a month later, while still awaiting trial, he committed another sexual assault, resulting in a second arrest. Williams stood trial for both crimes, was found guilty, and received the 25 years prison sentence. However, upon reviewing his case, an appeals court found that there were procedural errors in the original trial. As a result, his sentence was significantly shortened and ultimately led to his parole in October 1996. William moved into his mother's home in Anadarko, Oklahoma, after serving 9.5 years. He regained his driver's license in early 1997 and then relocated to Houston, Texas. Shortly after, on May 16, 1997, he attempted to abduct and sexually assault Sandra Sapah, a 19-year-old. When Sandra stopped at a gas station in Webster, Texas, to use a payphone. After the call, she returned to her car and began driving but soon had a flat tire, forcing her to stop again. As she stood there, unsure of what to do next, William stopped the car behind her and offered to help. Sandra accepted his offer and got into the truck. However, William's intentions were sinister, and he overpowered her. Binding her wrists, then he continuing to drive on Interstate 45. Panicking, Sandra discovered that the door was unlocked. Despite being pregnant and fear for her life, Sandra made an attempt to escape by breaking free from the restraints and jumping out. Unfortunately, William caught hold of her and dragged her several miles along the pavement, causing severe injuries. Eventually, Sandra managed to break free and was taken to a nearby hospital. The police were notified, and she provided a description of her attacker. However, due to her traumatic state, she was unable to recall crucial details about the incident. To catch the predator, detectives needed more information. Months after the attack, they decided to use hypnosis on Sandra to see if she could remember anything else. Under hypnosis, Sandra recalled crucial details, including the license plate number of the truck that was involved in the crime. The detectives discovered a lead when they tracked down the owner of the vehicle with the matching license plate number. William was convicted of aggravated kidnapping and sentenced to 60 years in prison in 1998. While he was serving his sentence, detectives began to suspect that he might be linked to other crimes. Unraveling these secrets took years, leaving several families without answers. On a rainy April 3, 1997, 12-year-old Laura Smither asked her mother for permission to go jogging by herself at 9 a.m. Her mother agreed, not knowing that this ordinary decision would change her life forever. Laura Smither is the daughter of Bob and Gay Smither. She grew up in Friendswood, along with her younger brother. From an early age, Laura demonstrated a kind and gentle nature. She excelled academically and showed great talent in ballet. After being accepted into the prestigious Houston Ballet Academy, her goal of becoming a professional ballerina became a reality just days before this tragic incident. Laura's mother was surprised when she asked to go jogging that day, as she rarely ventured out alone. Homeschooled by her parents, Laura didn't even attend school. However, her desire to improve her dance skills had recently inspired her to take up cardio exercises, such as jogging. She had planned to go for a short run while making breakfast, and her mother agreed, she unaware of the danger lurking nearby. When Laura failed to return after a few hours, her parents began to worry. Normally, Laura was under close supervision and never went out alone for long. Her father, Bob Smither, searched the neighborhood but found no sign of her. He figured his daughter wouldn't be out for long, but she later didn't come back. Laura's parents reached out to relatives and friends to see if anyone had any information about her whereabouts, but no one had seen her. And they contacted the police to file a missing persons report. According to Bob, Laura went jogging this morning and it took longer than he expected. As police began their investigation, locals joined Laura's family to assist in the search. With photos of Laura in hand, her family and neighbors went door to door, asking if anyone had any information. The next morning, the police resumed their search, on foot combing through the nearby woods and helicopters scouring the area from above. Despite the initial lack of leads, the community's determination never wavered. Hundreds of volunteers joined the cause, and the eventually swelling to 6,000 volunteers for a week. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies worked diligently to locate Laura. The National Coast Guard and the FBI also joined forces with the local police department to aid in the extensive search operation. Initial theories suggested that Laura may have become lost in the woods, but after that, the investigation went in one direction, now focus on the possibility of criminal behavior. On Sunday, April 20, 1997, a gathering at Friendswood High School was taking place to discuss the next steps in finding Laura. During this meeting, the police chief expression became anxious after receiving the phone call, leaving those present there wondering what made him react like that. That evening at 10 p.m., Laura's parents received devastating news. A man walking his dog near a retention pond in Pasadena, about 12 miles from where Laura went missing, stumbled upon a badly decomposing body of a young girl. The girl was wearing only a pair of socks and was found in a muddy area. The police immediately suspected that the body was Laura's, and this was later confirmed through an autopsy. Everyone was devastated by the sudden and tragic loss of Laura. In addition to their grief, fear gripped the neighborhood, with many worried that a predator was on the loose and could target another child. To address these concerns and prevent further harm, the police opened an investigation, but initially they had no information about the perpetrator. To gather more information, the police started interviewing sex offenders in the area. They began to focus on William Reese, a 38-year-old equipment operator, was working at Windsor Estate in Friendswood at the time. On the day of Laura's disappearance, William left the workplace around the time she went missing and returned 30 minutes later, it raising suspicions about his activities during that short period. Police conducted an in-depth investigation but were unable to find any evidence shows that William is involved in this crime. As a result, the case went unsolved for years, leaving many questions unanswered. 19 years later, another mysterious disappearance happened to Kelly Cox, 20 years old. Kelly, a criminology student at the University of North Texas, in Denton on July 15, 1997, she and her classmates took a field trip to a local prison in Denton for a criminology class. She left her car in the parking lot across from the police station and had hidden a spare key in a magnetic box underneath her car. She then locked her belongings, including her cell phone, inside the car as instructed by her professor. After completing the jail tour at noon, Kelly rushed to her car to go to the university to take a test. However, when she tried to use the spare key to open her car door, it did not work, despite she checking it the night before. Since Kelly's phone was locked in her car, so she went to a nearby gas station and used a payphone to call her boyfriend, Lawrence Harris III, for help. She then purchased a drink inside the gas station. But from that point on, Kelly was never seen alive again. After about 45 minutes, Lawrence arrived at the meeting place, but when he got there, her car was still in the parking lot, yet Kelly herself was nowhere to be found. Neither the key box nor the key were present at the scene. He spent some time searching for Kelly, and when he couldn't find her, he decided to call her mother to see if she had returned home safely. However, Kelly's mother informed him that she hadn't arrived. Despite the initial suspicion surrounding Kelly's disappearance, but her family chose to wait a little longer to see if she would come back. It wasn't until 5:30 p.m. that same day when Kelly failed to pick up her 19-month-old daughter, Alexis, from her babysitter, that her family became certain that something was amiss. Kelly's family knew that she was a responsible mother, and it was entirely out of character for her to neglect her daughter like that. When Kelly was reported missing, the police immediately started searching for her. In keeping with standard procedure in missing persons cases, the police started by scrutinizing people close to Kelly. Initially, they focused on Kelly's boyfriend Lawrence, but after he passed 4 polygraph tests, he was cleared as a suspect. The case made progress when information led them to another potential suspect, William Reese, who had been under investigation in the Laura Smithers case. William, a sex offender, was considered a top suspect in Kelly's disappearance because a gas station receipt placed him in the Denton area on the same day Kelly vanished, even though he didn't live there at the time. The police searched his car for Kelly's fingerprints but did not find any. Without any leads, witnesses, or surveillance footage, the case stalled and went unsolved for many years. Kelly's disappearance was extremely difficult for her mother and stepfather, who had to raise Alexis on their own. As the years went by, Kelly never returned, but her daughter followed in her mother's footsteps, attending the same university. Alexis held on to the hope that her mother would come back one day. Kelly's family never lost hope of her return, continued to share her story, and kept her picture visible. Unfortunately, their wish never came true, and Kelly never made it back home. On the morning of August 17, 1997, Jessica Kane, a 17-year-old high school student, failed to return home after attending a theater party the night before. Jessica was born on August 28, 1979. She is known for her vibrant personality, creativity, and passion for sports. While studying at O'Connell High School in Galveston, Texas, she did well academically and served as captain of the school's coaching team. After focusing on her drama career and participating in numerous plays, Jessica attended a musical review in Dickinson on August 16, 1997. Following the event, she joined her friends at a cast party at Bennigan's on Bay Avenue Boulevard. However, Jessica did not return home that night, worrying her mother, who woke her father and called her. They reached out to several friends who had attended the party with Jessica, and all of them reported that she had left around 1:30 a.m. Jessica's parents immediately sensed that something was wrong and began searching for her. Upon investigating, Jessica's father found her vehicle parked near the Lamarck exit, close to the freeway, with her valuables still intact. He later quickly reported his to the police. As police began their investigation, hundreds of volunteers joined in the search for Jessica. During this challenging time, Jessica's parents met Bob and Gay Smither, a couple who had also lost their daughter, Laura Smither. Jessica's family and the Smithers family are going through their own grief. The Smithers family has tried to support Jessica's parents in their search for her. Despite the best efforts of police and volunteers, no sign of Jessica has been found. As a result, police are beginning to consider foul play and believe the chances of Jessica being found alive are extremely low. The case eventually went cold, but Jessica's family never gave up searching for their daughter. In a separate incident, on July 26, 1997, 19-year-old Tiffany Johnson's car was found abandoned at a car wash in Bethany, Oklahoma. But she disappeared without a trace. Tiffany was born on April 6, 1978, to Michael and Kathy Dober. She was the youngest daughter, extremely close to her family, especially her mother. Tiffany was a lively and optimistic young woman who grew up in a small town, with a passion for plants and gardening that she inherited from her grandfather. After graduating from high school in 1996, she married Ryan Johnson in 1997 and moved to Bethany, Oklahoma, where she took on 2 jobs to save money for college. Her dream was to attend Oklahoma State University to pursue a degree in botany. But unfortunately, that goal was never realized. On July 26, 1997, Tiffany finished her part-time shift at a restaurant around 2 p.m. She later headed home to get ready for a night out with her husband, Ryan, to celebrate their 3-month anniversary. Tiffany was supposed to meet Ryan at 11 p.m., but before that, she stopped at the Sunshine Car Wash to wash her white neon Dodge. Tragically, she was never seen again. When Ryan went looking for her that night, he couldn't find her at home and found no signs of her whereabouts. A police officer from the Bethany Police Department discovered Tiffany's abandoned white Dodge Neon at a car wash around midnight. The car's key was still in the ignition, and the door was open. The officer found Tiffany's purse inside the vehicle and a phone number for her mother, Kathy, in the glove box. However, when contacted, Kathy had no information about her daughter's whereabouts. The investigators then reached out to Tiffany's husband, Ryan, who also claimed to be unaware of his wife's location. This raised concerns, and it became apparent that something was amiss. The next day, July 27, 1997, near I-40 and Gregory Road, searchers found the body of a young Caucasian woman. When the police arrived at the scene, they suspected the body might be Tiffany's. The suspicion was confirmed when her husband Ryan identified the body from the pictures. Tiffany's body was found with only a swimsuit on, as all other clothing had been removed. The autopsy results revealed that Tiffany was sexually assaulted and strangled to death, although the exact time of her death could not be confirmed. Authorities collected unknown DNA from her body as evidence. With no leads on a suspect, investigators initially focused on Ryan, Tiffany's husband. However, they soon discovered that Tiffany was last seen at the car wash at 6 p.m., and Ryan had a solid alibi, having been at work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. A new lead emerged when the car wash owner contacted investigators, reporting that he saw a customer on the same day Tiffany disappeared. The customer was a man named William Reese, who had been featured in a news report a few months earlier for his involvement in an abduction in Texas. What's more noteworthy is that William has a personal relationship with Tiffany. His mother was good friends with Tiffany's mother, although he himself had never met Tiffany. After her death, he even called Tiffany's mother to offer his condolences. Despite this new information, police were still unable to gather enough evidence to prove William's involvement in Tiffany's murder, and the case remained unsolved for a long time. In 2015, thanks to advancements in DNA technology, investigators found new evidence in the Tiffany case. A DNA swab taken during Tiffany's autopsy in 1997 was sent to the lab for testing. The results matched a DNA profile in the Cody's database, which implicated William in Tiffany's murder. He was subsequently charged in Oklahoma City with the 1997 kidnapping and murder of Tiffany. Just as his trial was about to begin, William unexpectedly started confessing to other crimes in an attempt to reach a deal with the prosecution. Despite having eluded police for 19 years, he ultimately revealed the truth, having a history of aggravated kidnapping and other crimes. When shown photos of Laura Smither, Jessica, and Kelly Cox, he immediately accepted responsibility for their murders and disappearances, although denying any sexual motive behind his actions. William was questioned about his victims in Oklahoma. He agreed to cooperate with authorities by showing them the burial sites of two victims, Jessica and Kelly, on one condition: he would not face the death penalty. In April 2016, investigators followed him to a location in a Houston pasture where human remains were discovered. After several days of excavation, the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed that the remains belonged to Jessica. The search continued in Brazoria County, where another set of human remains was found. Dental records confirmed that these remains belonged to Kelly Cox. The trial for the murder of another victim, Tiffany, began in May 2021. William was found guilty by a jury on May 28, 2021, and received a death sentence on August 19, 2021, for her abduction and murder. After his murder conviction in Oklahoma, he was sent to Texas in March 2022 to face trial for the murders of Laura Smither, Kelly Cox, and Jessica. He pleaded guilty to all three charges and received a life imprisonment sentence in June 2022. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sarai Sierra. Sarai Sierra was born on November 9, 1979, in New York City to Puerto Rican parents who immigrated to the United States in 1973. Her father, Dennis, and mother, Bethany Jimenez, settled in Manhattan, where they raised their children, including Sarai, her brother, David, and her sister, Christina. Soon after moving, the couple joined the local Protestant community. They raised all of their children strictly, following the religious teachings of their chosen faith. Sarai's family regularly attended church together, socialized with other members of the religious community, and the children attended Sunday school. Growing up, Sarai had a strong, energetic, and creative personality. Unlike her younger sister Christina, who was quiet, obedient, and very modest. Sarai's family had strict rules that all members had to follow. These rules, which were applied to the daily routines of the family members, such as the daughters were not allowed to socialize with boys, and they had to be home by 9 p.m. All their friendships were controlled, and the parents always knew where they were and with whom. Sarai's life revolved around her family, school, and church, and her sphere of contact was limited to those places. For a young, active, sociable girl like Sarai, she felt trapped by the boundaries set by her parents, even though they thought they were doing the best for her. During her school years, Sarai planned to go to a teacher training college and become a teacher in the field of culture or art. However, as she neared graduation, her interests changed and she became fascinated with psychology, considering a career change to a field related to this new passion. At a religious community meeting, a young man named Stephen noticed Sarai, a striking dark-haired beauty. He found an excuse to talk to her. At the time, Sarai was 18 years old, while Stephen was 7 years older than her. Despite the age difference, her parents found Stephen to be a decent, polite, and honest young man, so her parents agreed to let the couple date. Stephen quickly got along with Sarai's parents, Dennis and Bethany. Less than a year after meeting, in February 1999, the couple married. Sarai was 19 and Stephen was 26. It is possible that Sarai did not truly love him, but agreed to marry him for the purpose of moving out of her parents' home and freeing herself from such strict control. After the move, Stephen and Sarai settled in Michigan, where Stephen's parents lived. The change was especially important for Sarai, who had spent most of her life in New York. The new environment seemed to have a positive effect on her. She enjoyed decorating her new home, making new friends, and exploring the area. Sarai found work as a receptionist at a local dental office and was thinking about getting a college degree. Sarai soon became pregnant, giving birth to a boy and then a girl. As a result, her college plans were postponed. A few years later, the Sarai family of 4 decided to move again, this time to California, where they settled in the Silver Lake neighborhood of Los Angeles. Here, Stephen was offered a job, but the couple soon realized that the money he earned was not enough to live on. After consulting with each other, they decided to move back to New York. They found a small apartment to rent. At this time, the couple was having financial difficulties. Sarai remained at home to take care of the children, while her husband did many odd jobs to make a living. However, things began to stabilize when the children started going to school. Sarai got a job at an advertising agency. At the same time, Stephen found a stable job as a bus driver on one of the city's routes. Sarai put her studies on hold to raise her children. As her children grew older and her life became more stable at the age of 30, she returned to her long-cherished dream of pursuing an education. She decided to pursue a different field, choosing a degree in psychology at a local university. However, the boring classes began to bore Sarai. She decided to find herself in a different field, choosing a career that would inspire her and allow her to express herself. Since Sarai had always been creative, good at drawing and seeing beauty in everything, her artistic eye eventually led her to photography. To further hone her skills, she joined a prestigious photography community in New York. Her talent was quickly recognized as she demonstrated her ability to choose the perfect angle and create beautiful compositions. Her work was even praised by professionals for its creativity and vision. In early 2012, Sarai's colleagues advised her to create a social media page to showcase her work. She followed their advice and started posting her photos online. The response was overwhelming, with thousands of users subscribing to her profile and enthusiastically commenting on each new post. Within a few months, she became a real star, and her subscriber count continued to grow exponentially. The enthusiasm really overwhelmed Sarai. She felt that she could achieve much more and wanted to develop and improve in this direction. So she proposed to organize a group photography trip to look for beautiful and unusual locations in different parts of the world. She started by organizing short trips within the country, focusing on capturing iconic architectural landmarks and historical monuments through her lens. When her photos received significant attention and praise, she was motivated to continue. Next, Sarai wanted to travel to Istanbul, one of the most ancient and beautiful cities in the world, to document the city's historical sites. Sarai's decision to take a photography trip to the other side of the world surprised her family, especially her parents. Since she had never traveled abroad or been away from home for a long time, they were not very happy with the idea. However, Sarai was determined to carry out her plan and even arranged for her best friend, Magdalena, to come along. Her parents did not know that Sarai's family was going through a difficult time, as her relationship with her husband began to fall apart. It is possible that this difficult situation prompted Sarai's desire to take the trip. She wanted to change her surroundings and think about her family's difficulties. Sarai had lived in a strict framework for too long, and now she was eager to do what she wanted to do. At the same time, her husband Stephen's social media profile began posting cryptic statuses, reflecting on the value of marriage, love, and mutual respect in relationships. And there was a post where Stephen darkly hinted at Sarai's infidelity. But a few hours later, Stephen deleted the post, leaving unanswered questions behind. It was clear that he felt unhappy and unloved, and he tried to show it to everyone through his social media page. Sarai was also going through the same pain, but she kept it to herself, trying not to complain and focusing on her work. Sarai's long-awaited trip was coming up, but she received some disappointing news just before her departure. Her best friend Magdalena, who was supposed to accompany her, had to cancel the trip due to unforeseen work issues. Although Sarai was extremely upset, she had been looking forward to the trip for so long that she decided not to change her plans. Her family was worried about her traveling alone to a foreign country, but Sarai reassured them that everything would be fine. She promised to keep them updated by calling, writing, and sending photos every day. In addition, Sarai was also planning to visit Germany and Austria, where she had scheduled several commercial photography assignments. Her entire trip was literally scheduled by the hour, and she would not deviate from the plan. On January 7, 2013, Sarai traveled from New York to Istanbul. She had some cash with her, and she had carefully packed her belongings, which included a smartphone, a tablet, and a cheap DSLR camera with a professional lens. Upon arriving in Istanbul, she reported to her family that she had landed safely and was on her way to her pre-booked hotel, which was located in a less popular part of the city. Due to budget constraints, the hotel was located in a remote neighborhood that locals considered unsafe. After dropping off her luggage and changing into her travel clothes, she headed to the nearest metro station, eager to explore the historic city center. Sarai spent her days in Istanbul sightseeing and capturing the beauty of the city through photography. Every evening, she would video call her parents and husband, sharing stories about her experiences and plans for the next day. She also spent time processing the photos and sharing them on social media. Unknown to her family, Sarai met a young man named Tylan on social media in 2012. Over the course of several months, they corresponded and became very close. It was Tylan who convinced her to fly to Istanbul. As a native of Istanbul, Tylan was the ideal guide, showing Sarai around interesting places. Sarai trusted Tylan completely, and they spent many days together exploring the city. After a week in Istanbul, Sarai traveled to several European countries, where she arranged several commercial photo shoots. Here, Sarai saved money on hotel rooms, as she was welcomed by fans who had subscribed to her social media accounts and had been following her work for a long time, offered to let her stay. And her fan was a young man in Austria who met her at the airport in Vienna. He was a few years older than Sarai and shared her passion for photography, admired her work, and wanted to meet her in person. Sarai's trip went smoothly. She visited all the planned destinations and met everyone she had arranged to meet. On the third day, she arrived in Berlin, where she was greeted at the airport by fans who took her on a tour of the city. After completing her assignment in Germany, Sarai returned to the airport and flew back to Istanbul, planning to stay there for 2 more days before returning home. Upon arriving in Istanbul, she met Taylan and they spent the day exploring the city together. They ended the evening at a popular local bar, and after midnight, Taylan took Sarai back to her hotel, where they said their goodbyes. On January 21, 2013, Sarai was scheduled to return home to New York after her photography trip. Before leaving, she informed her parents and husband of her flight details. Since this was the longest trip she had ever taken away from home, everyone was relieved that the trip was coming to an end. However, before returning, Sarai decided to take a last walk around the city and take some more beautiful photos to show everyone. At the appointed time, Sarai Dennis, father, arrived at the airport to pick up his daughter because her husband was at work and could not come. He arrived early to avoid any possible traffic jams. However, after the plane landed and all the passengers had disembarked, Sarai disappeared without a trace. Worse still, her phone was unreachable and all attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Dennis then waited a while longer, and worried about his daughter's absence, he went to see a representative of the airline. They told him that a passenger by that name was not on the flight, which shocked Dennis. He quickly called Stephen and told him what was happening, emphasizing that she needed to be found immediately. Stephen started contacting the hotel in Istanbul where his wife, Sarai, was staying. The hotel staff informed him that although it was time to check out, her belongings were still in the room and she had not arrived to check out, and she did not appear at the hotel on the second day. This information sent family members into a panic, as they did not know where Sarai was and did not understand what to do next. Stephen accessed his wife's account, looking for clues about her disappearance. He discovered her correspondence with a man named Taylan, which aroused his suspicions. Despite this, Stephen decided to contact Taylan directly to find out more. However, Taylan claimed that he had seen Sarai the day before she left and that she had not even called him before the flight. Despite her promise, Sarai's family quickly notified the U.S. Embassy in Istanbul about her disappearance. The next day, a large-scale search operation was launched in the area. Sarai's husband and parents immediately flew to Istanbul to join the search effort. The police launched an investigation, starting with trying to identify the people Sarai had met before she disappeared. To gather information, they interviewed the staff at the hotel where she was staying, as well as her friend Taylan. According to the hotel manager, he last saw Sarai the evening before she disappeared, when she left the hotel with a small bag and a camera. Although she was scheduled to check out the next day, she never returned to the hotel. In addition, the receptionist provided a description of the clothes Sarai was wearing on the day she disappeared. The situation with Taylan is much more interesting and ambiguous. First, the guy's name is actually Taran, and it is still unclear why he introduced himself to Sarai with a fake name. And it is worth considering that they had been in regular contact for several months before meeting, and Sarai had come to Istanbul at his invitation. All of this suggests that there was a romantic relationship, but Taran himself categorically denied it, claiming that they were just friends. The next stage of the investigation involved reconstructing Sarai's route in detail. To achieve this, the police examined her mobile phone data and reviewed the footage of street surveillance cameras. They discovered that Sarai took the metro to Sultanahmet district and then to the Cape between the Bosphorus Strait and the Golden Horn Bay, followed by a trip to Eminönü Bazaar. However, she got lost in the crowd of tourists at the bazaar. The police continued to track her route and discovered that she had boarded the metro again, intending to visit the Sarıyer Walls. Unfortunately, she disappeared from the camera's view again. Police decided to investigate the area around the Sarıyer Wall, questioning locals and searching the area in the hope of finding any witnesses who might have seen a woman holding a camera. After an extensive search, they found the body of a young woman near the ancient Constantinople wall. The body was hidden under a dirty, old blanket, making it less noticeable. Police believe the blanket was used to transport Sierra to the location. There was no clothing on the lower part of the body. An autopsy found that Sarai died from severe head trauma caused by a heavy, blunt object. Her body also showed signs of trauma, including hematoma and 2 broken ribs. There were also several hematomas on her body and several broken ribs. Pathologists also found epithelial granules and blood under Sarai's fingernails, indicating that she had defended herself and scratched at the attacker. An examination found that the attacker had taken her handbag, phone, and camera, but they left behind valuables such as her gold earrings, wedding ring, and expensive watch. A review of local camera footage showed a young woman resembling Sarai filming with her phone. A man then approached her, punched and pushed her, and both disappeared from view of the camera. Unfortunately, the identity of the attacker was not immediately known, leading to mixed reviews. The incident quickly gained international attention after details of the case were leaked to the media. There have been many questions and mixed reviews about Sarai's international travels. And police suspect that Sarai flew to Istanbul to visit an acquaintance, Taylan, whose real name is Taran, and then planned to meet another man in Austria. However, both men have denied having an intimate relationship with Sarai. The high-profile case was investigated jointly by Turkey's special services and the FBI, but initially, neither agency had any concrete leads to follow. A few weeks after the crime, police tracked down the suspect, Zia Tasali, who had a criminal record and made a living by picking up scraps of paper on the city streets. However, before they could question him, Zia borrowed money from relatives and fled the country, likely crossing into Syria through Hatti province. Police obtained a search warrant for his home and collected a DNA sample. They compared the DNA to skin particles and semen found on Sarai's body, confirming their suspicions that Zia was indeed the perpetrator. Sarai's phone was last active in the neighborhood where he lived. Police initially gave up on arresting Zia after learning that he had fled to Syria. However, an unexpected development changed everything. The suspect attempted to cross the border into Istanbul again, this time to return home, but was arrested for illegal entry. Before his arrest, he had joined a rebel group in Syria, acquired a gun, and was injured in the conflict. Fearing for his safety, he decided to return to Istanbul with the gun, leading to his arrest. Border police quickly alerted security services upon discovering his true identity. During questioning, Zia Tasali gave a statement. On a hiking trail to the Sarıyer Wall, he noticed a young woman and watched her from a distance, admiring her as she took pictures. As he approached her, the woman, who appeared to be trying to communicate with him through gestures, seemed to try to ask him something, but Zia did not understand because of the language barrier. However, he noticed that she had a brand new iPhone and an expensive camera, which caught his attention. As she continued walking, he followed her. It was getting dark and there was no one else around, near the location next to the wall. At one point, Zia thought that Sarai was taking pictures of him, which angered him. He picked up a large rock and hit Sarai on the head. The two rolled down the rubble of the wall. After Sarai was knocked unconscious, Zia took advantage of the situation and sexually assaulted her. Zia then delivered another serious blow to the head to finish Sarai off. Zia took Sarai's belongings, including her bag, camera, and phone, and left the scene. As he was leaving, he came across a discarded blanket and decided to return to cover her body. He then dragged the body to a location out of sight of the hiking trail. He then covered the body with a blanket and left. Notably, while the search for Sarai was ongoing, Zia returned to the crime scene again to confirm that the victim, Sarai, was dead and that her body was still in the same position he had left it. When Zia found out on the news that the victim's body had been found, he knew the police would soon be looking for him, so he decided to flee the country. He borrowed money from his sister, who often felt sorry for him. The stolen items turned out to be worthless to Zia. The camera was broken during the fall and the smartphone was locked with a password that he could not crack. Therefore, he threw away the smartphone along with the other stolen items when he fled. Zia did not deny his guilt, and judging by his testimony, he had no remorse for what he had done, nor was he troubled by his conscience. Important evidence presented in court included forensic DNA analysis. This analysis showed that the skin found under Sarai's fingernails belonged to Zia and that his DNA was also found on her body. Additional evidence included data from Sarai's cell phone, which showed that it was last used near Zia's home. Additionally, a surveillance video recording of the attack added to the case file and supported the evidence against Zia. The presentation of all the evidence led to the decision that Zia should undergo a psychiatric evaluation. This decision was based on concerns about his sanity due to his unstable behavior and calm description of the violent crimes he had committed. The experts ultimately concluded that Zia was sane and fully aware of his actions at the time of the attack. In 2014, Judge Ely made the final decision in the case. Zia Tasali was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life in prison. This decision was accepted by Sarai's family, who felt it was appropriate. After a thorough autopsy, Sarai's body was returned to New York for burial. Her funeral was held according to the family's wishes and in accordance with their religious beliefs. In her memory, Sarai's family created a website featuring her previously unpublished work, including photographs. The photographs attracted international attention, with people from all over the world wanting to buy them. The money raised from the sale of the photographs was set aside by the family for a charitable cause. Her husband, Stephen, began a close relationship with a woman in the Christian community who supported him during this difficult time and regularly helped him with childcare and household chores. Less than 2 weeks before the anniversary of his wife's death, Stephen married his new partner. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jimia, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jimia and Sean, were able to escape, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shane, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shane in the fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bramby, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jemia and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. He locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6th, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remain unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation, and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tayan's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation. The police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, "No, they didn't." During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution." Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee, or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jason Corbett. Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old Irish businessman, Jason has a warm, friendly personality. Born in Limerick, Ireland, Jason has a twin brother named Wayne and an older sister named Tracy. He married Margaret Fitzpatrick in 2003 when he was 27. They later welcomed 2 children, a son named Jack and a daughter named Sarah, whom they loved dearly. Jason's family seemed to be living a happy life in Ireland, but this happiness was short-lived. Tragedy struck in 2006, shortly after Sarah was born. Margaret suffered a severe asthma attack one night, waking Jason up because she was having trouble breathing. Jason immediately tried to help her by giving her medication and using her inhaler, but her condition quickly worsened. In a panic, Jason called an ambulance, but unfortunately, Margaret died on the way to the hospital. Jason Corbett was the director of a small packaging company in Ireland when he lost his wife, leaving him to raise his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter alone. His friends witnessed his deep sadness and struggled to cope with the loss. A year after his wife's death, Jason was looking for a nanny and housekeeper to care for his children. This led him to Molly Martins, a 25-year-old American woman. In March 2008, Molly moved from the United States to Ireland to take up a nanny job. A friend of Jason's accompanied him to the airport to pick Molly up. The friend immediately became concerned that Molly might not be suitable for the job. Molly's youthful appearance, flashy style, and heavy makeup aroused suspicion. With her bright jacket, cowboy boots, curly hair, and heavy makeup, Molly looks more like a stage performer than a responsible nanny and maid. Molly was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. After attending Clemson University for a while, she dropped out and decided to start a new life in Ireland. There, she worked as a nanny for Jason's family, taking care of his 2 children, Jack and Sarah. Molly immediately took to the children, showing them care and concern. Jason's friends noticed a significant change in him. He seemed to be coming back to life after a period of grief. As Molly and Jason's relationship deepened, love blossomed and they began dating. The family of four went on vacations together, which brought them closer together. They began to plan for their future as a family. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason took Molly to a coffee shop, where he proposed to her with a ring. Overjoyed, Molly immediately began planning their wedding in the United States. She also convinced Jason to leave Ireland and move to the United States with her, and he agreed. In 2011, Jason sold his house, moved to the United States for work, and the family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina. The couple married in a beautiful ceremony attended by friends and family from both the United States and Ireland. After the wedding, Molly worked as a swimming instructor. But her main focus was raising Jack and Sarah. Jason, on the other hand, worked as a manager in the United States. At first, their life seemed perfect, but as time went on, their marriage began to fall apart. On August 1, 2015, Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited Jason's family home, where he greeted them at the entrance and helped them with their luggage. Tom had brought a gift for Jason's son, Jack, a baseball bat, but Jack was out with friends at the time. Instead, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had dinner together, eating pizza. Jack returned home late that night, but Tom decided to wait until the next morning to give him the baseball bat. After 11 p.m., the family went to bed. Molly and Jason were in the master bedroom on the first floor, while their children, Jack and Sarah, were in nearby rooms. Molly's parents were upstairs in the living room. Hours later, at 3 a.m., Molly's father, Tom, called 911 in a panic. He claimed that Jason had attacked his daughter, Molly, and in response, Tom had hit Jason with a baseball bat. Jason was now unconscious and bleeding. During the call, Tom expressed his fear that Jason's severe head injuries could be fatal and urgently requested an ambulance to their location. Tom asked the 911 operator for help, and she instructed Tom and Molly to perform CPR to try to revive Jason until paramedics arrived. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found Molly in the yard near a car, looking distressed and shocked but not crying. Inside the house, they discovered Jason Corbett's body in the master bedroom, surrounded by blood splattered on the bed, walls, and floor. Tom and Molly both had blood on their clothes. A baseball bat and a large pebble with blood on them were found near Jason, along with an overturned lamp. Jack and Sarah had been sleeping in their room during the incident. At the police station, Tom Martins, 66, a 30-year veteran of the FBI, stated that his son-in-law was mentally unstable and had been abusing his daughter. According to Tom, Jason had been drunk that night. Everyone had gone to bed, but Tom was awakened in the middle of the night by screams and loud voices coming from downstairs. He quickly got out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and ran down the stairs. When Tom entered the master bedroom, he found Jason strangling Molly with both hands. Tom yelled, "Let her go." In response, Jason turned to him and said, "I'm going to kill her." Tom and Molly did not deny their involvement in Jason's death but claimed they had acted in self-defense. Tom immediately felt the need to protect himself and those around him. He swung the baseball bat at Jason, but the blow seemed to have no effect. When Jason tried to drag Molly into the bathroom, Tom intervened, trying to stop him. The situation worsened when Jason pushed Tom, causing him to fall and his glasses to fly off. At this point, Tom felt his life was in danger. Jason then spotted the baseball bat on the floor and reached for it. Molly quickly responded by grabbing a rock and hitting Jason in the head, yelling, "Don't touch my dad," as she did so. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tom picked up the baseball bat and repeatedly hit Jason until he fell to the floor. Molly, 32, provided a consistent account of events during her interview. She explained that her daughter Sarah woke up with a nightmare that night, which caused Jason to become angry and attack her. Jason allegedly began strangling Molly, threatening to kill her, and her father intervened to protect her. In order to protect her father, Molly claimed to have hit Jason on the head with a heavy rock. When asked where she got the rock, Molly replied that she had placed it on her bedside table. The rock had originally been used for drawing pictures with children as part of a gardening project, but Molly could not remember exactly how many times she had hit Jason, describing the incident as a desperate fight for her life. During her interview, Molly told police that she was still in pain from the alleged strangling incident. Photos of Molly, which showed a red mark in the middle of her neck, were compared to photos taken of her when she was arrested. However, the comparison did not reveal any red marks on her neck at the time of her arrest. Molly later admitted that the fight with her husband had actually occurred the day before the tragedy, in which Jason had grabbed her arm and neck. During questioning, she repeatedly complained of a sore throat. Both Molly and her father, Tom, testified that Jason had abused his wife, but Jason's family disputed these claims. Jason's sister, Tracy, noticed that Molly was controlling of Jason, often becoming upset if things did not go her way. She also noticed that Molly did not want to socialize with Jason's family members when they visited. Additionally, one of Molly's friends shared a disturbing claim that Molly had claimed to be friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until her death. However, this contradicted the family's account, as they knew Margaret had died of an asthma attack, not cancer. Despite Jason's relatives' warnings and attempts to intervene about Molly's unusual behavior, the wedding still takes place, marking the beginning of a complicated and troubled marriage. Over time, Molly's behavior began to raise concerns. Jason noticed a major change in her personality and suspected that she might have mental health issues. She was initially kind and loving, but now seemed manipulative and controlling. This worried Jason and led to more problems in their relationship. Molly began distancing herself from Jason's family by cutting her phone calls to just seconds. Before her death, Jason took steps to protect his children, Jack and Sarah. He named his sister, Tracy, as their legal guardian in case anything happened to him. Tracy knew that if Jason died, Molly would have custody of the children. After Jason's death, Tracy traveled to North Carolina to file for custody, preparing for a legal battle with Molly. During her troubled marriage to Jason, Molly consulted with an attorney to understand her rights to Jason's children in the event of a divorce. The lawyer suggested that she record their arguments and gather evidence that could be used against Jason. As a result, Molly began secretly recording their conversations. In these recordings, Molly appeared unresponsive, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions as his voice grew louder. After Jason's death, Molly confided in a close friend about her marital problems, describing Jason as controlling and abusive. She accused him of forcing her to have sex, verbally abusing her, and becoming increasingly aggressive toward her over time. Despite this, Molly never reported Jason's behavior to the police. For days after Jason's death, his 10-year-old son Jack and 8-year-old daughter Sarah were interviewed by a child welfare specialist. During the conversation, they shared their thoughts about their parents' relationship. The children described seeing their mother, Molly, being careful not to wake their father, Jason, for fear of him getting angry. Jack described a pebble on his parents' bedside table, explaining that they had brought it in because it was raining and planned to decorate it later. Both Jack and Sarah described witnessing arguments between them. According to the children, their father, Jason, often initiated these arguments, which included hitting, pushing, and swearing at his mother, Molly, over trivial matters. Jason's autopsy report found that he died of traumatic brain injury. He had suffered approximately 12 severe blows to the head with a baseball bat and a rock, all concentrated in the same area. The injuries were so severe that his scalp was torn away from his skull and his skull was fractured. A toxicology report found that Jason's blood alcohol level was slightly higher than normal at the time of his death. He also had traces of trazodone, an antidepressant commonly prescribed to treat insomnia, in his body. Jason was buried in his hometown of Limerick, Ireland, next to his first wife, Margaret. After Jason's death, his sister, Tracy, took their children, Jack and Sarah, to Ireland, which left Molly shocked and heartbroken. She tried to contact Jack and Sarah by phone and social media. Molly and Tom claimed they acted in self-defense against Jason, but the investigation into his death continues. Tracy has another theory. She thinks Molly killed Jason because he planned to leave her and take their children. Tracy believes that Jason told Molly about his decision on the night of the incident, and Molly, afraid of being alone, reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah slowly adjust to their new lives. 9 months after their father's death, they revealed that they were forced to lie about domestic violence. They admit that Molly made up stories about their father's violent behavior, threatening to cut them off if they did not comply. The children clarify that their father had never abused Molly, contrary to what they had initially said. During the investigation, Molly's past relationship with her ex-husband Keith Megan came to light. Keith shared some revealing details about Molly's past. The two met on a dating website and quickly fell in love, moving in together just 6 weeks later. Keith described Molly as independent, fun-loving, carefree and unconventional. However, she eventually confided in him about her struggles with bipolar disorder. Keith was not overly concerned by the revelation, as Molly was on medication and appeared to be fine, apart from occasional changes in her behavior when she missed a dose. These changes did not manifest as violence or outbursts, but rather as clingy behavior during arguments, such as refusing to let Keith leave. Additionally, Molly would often spend hours in the bath, followed by periods of sitting on the cold floor and crying. Despite the difficulties they faced, Keith and Molly continued their life together and decided not to have children at that time. However, Molly soon revealed that she was pregnant, which took Keith by surprise. As the sole breadwinner, Keith was struggling financially and did not feel ready to become a father. Keith eventually proposed to Molly and she happily accepted, but due to her health problems, Molly continued to take prescription medication, including antidepressants, sometimes up to 16 pills a day. This caused Keith to worry about the effects of the medication on their unborn child. In a tragic turn of events, Molly had a dream that she had lost her baby, and the next day the hospital confirmed that the fetus had died. The loss put further strain on their relationship. Molly fell into a state of grief and was diagnosed with major depression. Her parents began to view Keith negatively, seeing him as the cause of Molly's problems. Molly planned to leave Keith in the United States to find work as a nanny for the family in Europe. In March 2008, she packed her things and moved out of the apartment they were sharing. 10 days later, she called Keith, telling him that she was in Ireland, had found a job, and was doing well. This was the last time they spoke. Years later, in October 2015, Keith received an email from a police officer in North Carolina revealing that Molly had kept her relationship with Keith and her move to Europe a secret. The email informed Keith that Molly's new husband, Jason Corbett, had been murdered. When Keith watched an interview with Molly and her father, Tom, they described Jason as a cruel person, but Keith did not believe their story. He thought their feelings seemed fake. In January 2016, Tom and Molly were charged with second-degree murder in Jason's death. At their trial in July 2017, Tom and Molly claimed they had acted in self-defense when they killed Jason. Tom said he had tried everything he could to keep himself and Molly safe. Tom admitted to beating Jason with a baseball bat, only stopping when he was sure Jason was no longer a threat. However, the prosecution argued that the severity of the attack showed a deep hatred for Jason rather than self-defense. Analysis of the bloodstains showed that some of the blows were delivered when Jason's head was between 30 and 50 centimeters above the ground, suggesting that Tom continued to attack even after Jason was no longer a threat. The presence of stains on Molly's nightgown near the area where Jason was struck suggests that she was nearby during the attack. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young testified about the injuries he observed on Tom and Molly on the night of the incident. He stated that Molly had self-inflicted wounds to her neck, telling her to stop while he was taking notes on her injuries. Other than some dried blood on her face and hair, Lieutenant Young found no other injuries on Molly. Tom also had no injuries, only blood on his watch and under his fingernails. Notably, his glasses were not broken. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also took the stand and described what she found when she arrived at the scene. When she examined Jason's body, she found that his torso was cold to the touch and had patches of dried blood. This contradicts Molly's statement that they called 911 immediately after Jason became unconscious. The police investigation discovered that Jason had a life insurance policy, with Molly listed as the beneficiary. Furthermore, it was revealed that Jason had financially supported Molly's parents. A neighbor of Jason's family testified at the trial. He recalled spending an evening with Jason from 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., drinking beer together. According to the neighbor, Jason seemed very relaxed at the time. The neighbor also witnessed Tom and his wife arriving at Jason's house and noted that Jason warmly welcomed them and helped them carry heavy luggage into the house. After 9 days of witness testimony, listening to arguments, and viewing haunting crime scene photos, the jury reached a verdict within 3 hours. The court found Molly Corbett and her father, Tom Martins, guilty of second-degree murder. Molly was sentenced to 20 years in prison, while her father was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As the verdict was read, Molly turned to her mother, expressing remorse. "Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Catherine Pileggi." Ronald Vinci was born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. From a young age, he showed a natural talent for entrepreneurship. In his 20s, he started his first business by renting a space on the Pacific Coast to sell Honda motorcycles. Over time, his small shop grew into one of the largest Honda dealership centers in the state. As his business success continued to grow, so did his wealth. Ronald expanded his business by opening more car dealerships, which significantly increased his earnings. Those who worked for him often described him as a strong-willed and determined individual. In his personal life, Ronald Vinci was married to a woman named Pamela, with whom he had a son named Carrie. However, their marriage eventually ended in divorce. After his divorce, Ronald began living a more extravagant lifestyle, spending his wealth on luxury items such as expensive toys, airplanes, and helicopters. His passion for collecting aircraft led him to acquire a large hangar to house his extensive collection. Ronald simplified his daily commute to work by securing government approval to build a helicopter pad on his property, despite some of his neighbors opposing the idea. Having the helicopter pad allowed him to commute to work directly from home by helicopter. He also had helicopter pads installed on the roofs of his car dealerships, making it easier for him to travel by air. Ronald, then 50 years old, met 34 years old Catherine in 1990. At the time, Catherine worked as a flight attendant. She originally from a family in a rural area of Georgia. Growing up, she participated in local beauty pageants where her bright smile and charisma easily captivated people. Her striking beauty and cheerful personality earned her many admirers. After completing her education, Catherine worked as a lab technician at a veterans hospital for several years. However, she felt unfulfilled and longed for more in life. Seeking a change, Catherine left her job in 1980 to join Delta Airlines as a flight attendant, earning an annual income of $20,000. She enjoyed her new role, taking care of passengers and serving meals, and even acquired useful tips like using coffee grounds to eliminate unpleasant odors on airplane seats. 10 years into her career as a flight attendant, Catherine's life took a dramatic turn. In 1990, she met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, on a flight. Despite their 14-year age difference, they fell in love, drawn to each other's charming personalities. Catherine eventually left her job and moved into Ronald's luxurious California home. Together, they shared a passion for travel and explored various destinations, with Aspen, Colorado, being a favorite getaway spot. Ronald and Catherine were in a decade-long relationship, but Ronald never proposed to Catherine. Eventually, they decided to part ways. Catherine moved to Florida, seeking a fresh start and a new partner. In April 2001, at age 45, Catherine began a relationship with 63-year-old Dilio Carano, a financially stable insurance agent, after being introduced by mutual friends. She shared with Dilio her previous unhappy relationship with Ronald, explained that it was a difficult time, filled with arguments, excessive drinking, and infidelity. Ronald had never proposed, despite her decade-long hope for marriage. Dilio promptly proposed to Catherine, and they got married in May 2001, just a month after meeting. After their wedding, the couple settled in Miami Beach, Florida, and Catherine seemed content with the marriage. Dilio describes Catherine's initial demeanor as being like a house cat, gentle, calm, and eating very little. In addition, Catherine is very afraid of water. She cannot bathe in the ocean, sea, or river. A few months into their marriage, Dilio noticed a dramatic change in Catherine's behavior. She began asking him for large sums of money, insisting that he buy her clothes and gifts. She would often compare him to her friends' more generous husbands. According to Dilio, Catherine was taking about $55,000 per month from him. She claimed the money was for education expenses, but never provided any receipts. After a few months of this financial strain, Dilio realized he had made a mistake by rushing into the marriage. He decided he wanted a divorce. The separation process was relatively easy, as they had no children or shared assets. Court documents revealed that Dilio's net worth was $4.5 million, while Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine prepared to move out of Dilio's house, she was overwhelmed with sadness and despair. In 2005, Ronald Vinci, a wealthy millionaire, made a big change by moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where friends had convinced him he would enjoy a favorable climate and low taxes. Prior to the move, Ronald had sold his car dealerships and amassed a substantial fortune. He purchased a luxurious fourth-floor apartment in Fort Lauderdale and soon reconnected with Catherine, a flight attendant he had previously dated. Catherine moved in with Ronald, and they rekindled their romance. Coincidentally, Catherine's ex-husband, Dilio Carano, lived in the same building but 30 floors. Dilio was perplexed by Catherine's decision to reconnect with Ronald, whom she had previously described as a monster. Neither Ronald nor Catherine go to work. They enjoyed a life of leisure, but their differences became increasingly apparent. Ronald struggled with his weight due to his love of rich foods, while Catherine maintained a strict diet and a very low weight of 42 kilograms. Ronald and Catherine had distinct personalities. Ronald loved attending lively parties, whereas Catherine preferred quieter evenings at home, often lost in crime novels. She favored casual clothing like shorts and sneakers. Despite their contrasting tastes, they commonly traveled together, exploring the Caribbean islands by air and sailing across the ocean. However, she struggled with aquaphobia, and her diary entries revealed her intense fear of the ocean. Ronald consistently encouraged Catherine to overcome her fear, and she made an effort to join him on these adventures despite her anxieties. This suggests Ronald had a strong influence over her. When not traveling, Ronald and Catherine would often host gatherings at their home. During these events, Ronald enjoyed great food and drinks, frequently ordering $1 tacos and strong beverages when out with friends at budget-friendly bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront. On occasion, he would embarrass Catherine by implying she was entirely dependent on him. Despite this, Catherine remained calm and composed. However, Catherine maintained her composure. She would quietly cater to Ronald's needs, especially when he had been drinking, by serving drinks and snacks and attending to his friends. Ronald's relationship with Catherine persisted for 5 years, despite his increasing hesitation to propose marriage. By 2010, he began sharing his feelings with friends, revealing his desire to end the relationship and find a younger partner. In early 2011, Ronald was hospitalized due to severe intestinal issues, which his doctors attributed to his years of excessive alcohol consumption. Prior to the hospitalization, Ronald had noticed an unusual change in the taste of his food, which sparked concern for his health. A friend joked that Catherine might have tried to poison him, but Ronald dismissed the idea without considering it seriously. Ronald's health issues mainly stemmed from his poor self-care. His frequent consumption of alcohol and pills, which he used to unwind and sleep, had severe negative effects on his body. Ronald Vinci purchased a $3 million waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale in June 2011, where he planned to spend his retirement. The 70-year-old millionaire looked forward to visits from his son, Kerry, and his grandson. Kerry worked as a waiter, a job that Ronald often teased his about, Ronald jokingly suggesting he was holding out for his inheritance. Tragedy struck on the afternoon of June 28, 2011. When Ronald's gardener called 911, reporting an incident at the mansion. Upon arrival, police found Ronald's lifeless body in a guest bedroom, wrapped in plastic bags and tightly sealed with tape inside a sleeping bag. Additionally, the sleeping bag contained soiled sheets and was covered with what appeared to be wet dirt, later confirmed to be coffee grounds. A further investigation revealed a slashed mattress. The gardener told the police that Catherine had said Ronald fell down the stairs, hit his head, and died. However, the officers were not convinced it was an accident. During questioning, the gardener provided a disturbing account of the incident before finding Ronald Vinci's body. When the gardener arrived at the Ronald residence in the morning, after receiving an urgent call from Catherine late at night, he was met with an horrific scene. Ronald's lifeless body was wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag in a guest bedroom. Catherine, visibly upset, begged the gardener to help her bury Ronald, revealing that Ronald wanted to be laid to rest in the ocean after his death. To fulfill this wish, Catherine had bought a blue container for Ronald's body, intending to take it out to sea on Ronald's yacht. Catherine had already stored the container in her garage before authorities were notified by the gardener. The medical examiner's thorough examination revealed horrific findings. 70-year-old Ronald had suffered from 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck, had injuries consistent with being hit by a hammer, and was ultimately killed by a gunshot wound to the head. Earlier, on the evening of June 27, friends gathered at Ronald's house. Catherine prepared a meal for the guests, while Ronald served drinks. The evening seemed normal at first, but it quickly turned into a tragic one. On the evening in question, Ronald reported that his passport and one of his pistols were missing during dinner. He also complained about the food, saying it was unusually bitter. Feeling unwell, Ronald unexpectedly went to bed at 7:30 p.m. A departure from his usual late-night routine. His friends found this early bedtime suspicious and eventually left his house. Later that night, Catherine was brought in for questioning. In her confession, she described a confrontation with Ronald, which occurred around 1 a.m. on June 28. According to she, a drunk Ronald woke up and began verbally insulting her. The situation escalated, resulting in Ronald chasing her down the stairs. However, He lost his balance, stumbled, and fell, hitting his head severely. Catherine claimed that she helped Ronald up and led him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. After cleaning the blood stains on the stairs, she checked on him a few hours later and found him asleep with a loaded gun. Catherine stated that she feared for her life, believing Ronald might kill her. In a state of fear and desperation, she grabbed the gun and shot Ronald in the head. During the interrogation, Catherine explained her actions, saying she was consumed by fear and anger, feeling as though her soul had left her body. After the shooting, Catherine further injured Ronald by stabbing him with a knife and hitting him with a hammer. She then wrapped his body in a bag in an attempt to hide the evidence. Realizing she needed help, Catherine contacted someone known as the gardener for assistance with disposing of the body. Before hiding the body, Catherine purchased a large container from a hardware store, intending to use it to dispose of Ronald's body in the ocean. This was confirmed by surveillance camera photos. Subsequent investigations uncovered a gun in Catherine's car, with her fingerprints on it, matching the gun used to shoot Ronald. Her car also contained a knife, pieces of a cut-up mattress, clothing, rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Catherine was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Just a month before the crime, she had been involved in a dispute with her sister. Catherine's sister claimed that she had borrowed money and refused to pay it back. But she maintained that the money was a gift and therefore did not owe her sister anything. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams coming from his house on the night of the murder. Additionally, a witness spotted a white vehicle with a large trailer near Ronald's house early in the morning. The car belonged to the gardener. According to Ronald's friends, he had been trying to end his relationship with Catherine for some time. The couple had been experiencing marital problems, including a lack of intimacy, and had been sleeping in separate rooms for months. In an attempt to finalize the separation, Ronald had tried to give she $1 million, just weeks before the tragedy, asking her to leave their house permanently. Prosecutors suspect Catherine's main motive was fear of losing her wealthy partner, Ronald. In contrast, Catherine's defense team argued that she was a victim of severe abuse and had acted in self-defense. Several questions arose during the trial, including why Catherine didn't immediately contact the police, why she initially lied about the incident, and why she endured years of abuse without leaving Ronald. Catherine's relatives testified in her defense, and a court psychiatrist identified signs of domestic abuse. However, none of Ronald's close friends or associates witnessed or reported any mistreatment in their relationship. Instead, they described she as calm and content, never complaining about her life. During the trial, Catherine made a surprising accusation against Ronald, claiming that he was responsible for the sudden and mysterious death of her younger sister, Angela, in December 2009. Catherine, Ronald, and Angela went on a Caribbean cruise together. Angela struggled with substance abuse and, during a party on the ship, she drank excessively, leading to severe illness and intense convulsions. In an attempt to save her sister, Catherine performed CPR, but unfortunately, Angela's heart stopped and she passed away. It was later discovered that Ronald had given Angela some pills on the evening of the cruise, which allegedly were intended to help her relax. Catherine strongly believed that these pills played a role in her sister's death. However, in an unexpected turn of events, Catherine was found guilty of Ronald's murder in 2014. The jury delivered a verdict that resulted in Catherine being sentenced to 25 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the LEL Correctional Institution in Marin County, Florida, and is set to be released in January 2034 at the age of 77. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Hiringa. Jessica Hiringa was born on July 16, 1987, in Norton Shores, Michigan, to a humble family, and that included a sister. At 22, She had a son named Zahn with her long-term partner Dakota Quayle Dyer, and by 25, the couple was still together and raising Zahn in a rented home. Jessica worked as a manager at a local Exxon gas station near Lake Michigan, where she was well-liked by customers for her friendly nature. She often worked extra hours to provide for Zahn, and her ambition was evident in her diary entries, which expressed her desire to pursue a college degree in accounting. However, financial constraints prevented her from achieving this goal. Dakota, her partner and the father of her child, was unable to fully support their family, leading to disagreements, and their relationship was strained. Despite being engaged, their wedding plans were repeatedly delayed due to various circumstances. On April 26, 2013, she started the day by shopping at a nearby store around 3 p.m. and then drove to work. Arriving at 4:35 p.m., Jessica began her night shift at the Exxon gas station. As she began her shift, she was the only employee on duty that night. At 11:14 p.m., a customer called 911 to report a strange situation at the Exxon station. He had entered the store to pay for his gas but found no one to take his payment. The store was unattended, with the door open and lights on. The customer informed the dispatcher 911, "The store is empty, but there are 2 cars parked outside, mine and another one. It looks unusual." Police officers arrived at the Exxon gas station about 10 minutes after the call. They inspected the petrol station and found no signs of a struggle or disturbance. Everything was in order. Inside the store, police discovered Jessica's coat and purse, containing $400, and her car and house keys in the back room. A single drop of Jessica's blood was found near the back door. Police also found a cap from a Walther P22 semi-automatic pistol's laser sight and 2 watch batteries on the floor. The cash register was intact, with all the money still in it. The last transaction was recorded at 10:52 p.m. for a lighter. Unfortunately, the gas station did not have interior surveillance cameras. Jessica's pack of cigarettes was left on the counter next to the cash register, suggesting she had temporarily stepped away. Her car was locked and parked outside, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. She had mysteriously vanished. The police discovered that the gas station was unattended, so they contacted the owner and informed her. The owner then asked a nearby manager to come to the gas station for protection. The police also notified Jessica's family that she was missing. Her parents began searching for clues and called her friends to see if they had any information. One friend reported being at the gas station around 8 to 9 p.m. that day and said everything seemed normal. However, a fellow employee who arrived to close the station shortly after recalled a suspicious incident. Around 11 p.m., the employee and her boyfriend drove by the station on a motorcycle and saw a silver Chrysler Town Country minivan parked near the back door with its door open. They initially thought Jessica might be involved in a theft, so they kept watching. The employee saw a young man with disheveled wavy hair and an orange sweatshirt near the minivan. He repeatedly opened and closed the rear door before driving away. Further investigation revealed a surveillance video from a nearby building showing a silver Chrysler passing the Exxon gas station at 11:02 p.m. The police also spoke to Christian, who reported seeing the man in the minivan talking to Jessica earlier. Christian initially believed the man was just flirting with Jessica because of her attractiveness. A composite sketch of the suspect in Jessica's disappearance was created with the help of Christian, who had seen the man near a minivan. The suspect was described as a young male with light skin, dark wavy hair, a stocky build, and approximately 6 feet tall. 3 days after Jessica went missing, the sketch was released. In spite of, police received many calls, but no information was available that helped the case. A main issue in the investigation was the large number of silver Chrysler minivans in the United States. Specifically, in Michigan, there were 15,000 registered vehicles of the same kind. This made it difficult to identify the driver of the minivan related to Jessica's disappearance. Jessica Hiringa's boyfriend, Dakota, was initially suspected in her disappearance due to their frequent arguments. However, Dakota denied this and cooperated with the investigation, stating he was at home with their son on the night of her disappearance. Since Dakota didn't have a car, he couldn't have gone to her workplace, and his phone records confirmed his alibi. After verifying his story, the police excluded him from the list of suspects. Further investigation revealed that Jessica's friendly and outgoing personality helped her attract many admirers. Jess Ammerman, a 37-year-old married plumber, was one such admirer. On the evening of her disappearance, around 9:30 p.m., Jess visited Jessica at the gas station, confessed his feelings, and claimed he was willing to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rejected his advances. He then left the station, called his wife, and spoke with her for about 50 minutes before returning home. After undergoing a polygraph test and being interrogated and interviewed along with his wife, the police also cleared Jess Ammerman as a suspect. Rob Fallett, the brother of the manager at the Exxon gas station, where Jessica worked, was initially considered a suspect in her disappearance. Around 9 p.m. on the day she vanished, Rob visited the station and reported that Jessica appeared upset. When he asked her what was wrong, she shared that she was having family problems. Rob offered to let her stay with him, but she declined the offer. Fallett then left to go night fishing in a nearby lake. After investigating Rob's alibi, detectives discovered his phone records supported his claim and he was cleared of the crime. Search and rescue operations for Jessica were launched with helicopters, specially trained dogs, and thorough searches of homes, businesses, wells, wooded areas, and Lake Michigan. However, no leads were found, causing the case to reach a standstill. About a year later, in February 2014, a similar incident occurred in Michigan. A young woman with a similar appearance to Jessica was kidnapped and attacked by a man while walking home late at night. She was taken to his apartment, where she was attacked, and her life was threatened. The woman was eventually released after several hours. The suspect, 42-year-old Brad Allen Mason. Mason was eventually found by police, but he resisted arrest, threatening officers with a fake gun. Then, he was fatally shot during the confrontation. Brad had a history of crime, including being convicted of kidnapping in 2004 and arrested for indecent exposure in 2011. In 2014, he lived in a dorm near the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. Despite this, investigators couldn't find any evidence linking Mason to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years after Jessica disappeared, a similar incident happened in 2016. A young woman was walking home from a friend's party late at night when she got lost on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan stopped and asked if she was okay, offering to give her a ride. She refused the ride but asked to use his phone. The man agreed, but only if she got into the minivan. Once she was inside, he locked the door, said his phone was dead, and he pulled out his gun, asked her to keep quiet. Then he started driving. The woman was feeling extremely unwell and nauseated, so she asked the driver to roll down the window for her. She quickly took advantage of the opportunity and jumped out of the moving vehicle through the window, running to a nearby house for safety. The driver quickly sped away and escaped. The victim immediately called the police and provided a detailed description of her kidnapper. By examining footage from nearby surveillance cameras, the police were able to identify the license plate number of the vehicle, a silver Chrysler Town & Country. The investigation eventually identified the driver as Jeffrey Willis, 46 years old. Jeffrey Willis, a factory worker, lived a reclusive and humble life, with no criminal record. When police found and searched his minivan, they discovered a semi-automatic Walther P22 pistol. It was discovered that this pistol had been reported stolen by a coworker of Jeffrey some time ago. Jeffrey was arrested and taken into custody. Upon searching his residence, police found a collection of various BDSM items, including handcuffs, chains, ropes, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet matching the Walther P22 pistol. They also discovered medical supplies and sedatives, which included insulin syringes with unknown substances and disposable gloves. Investigators found a diagram of the woman's body, with some parts marked. Upon examining his computer, several distressing videos were found, showing scenes of young women being kidnapped. A hidden hard drive discovered in a ventilation duct contained secretly recorded footage of Jeffrey's female neighbors swimming. Furthermore, on his computer, police discovered a folder labeled Victims that included 2 subfolders. The first subfolder was named after missing woman Jessica, and the second subfolder contained information about a murdered woman named Rebecca. Rebecca Bletch, a 36-year-old woman who suffered a tragic fate. Approximately 1 year after Jessica went missing, Rebecca was murdered on June 29, 2014. Rebecca had gone out for a run in the evening but never returned home. She was discovered by her neighbors lying on the road, with her clothing disheveled. Initially, it was believed that she had been hit by a car. Although Rebecca was unconscious, she still had a pulse when found. Emergency services were immediately called, but unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries before she could be saved. Autopsy reports later revealed that Rebecca died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, along with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of Rebecca's death, the suspect has not yet been identified. However, 2 years after Jeffrey's arrest, investigators uncovered new evidence linking Rebecca's murder to the handgun found in his small truck. Prosecutors alleged that Jeffrey had attempted to abduct Rebecca and bring her back to his home, but when Rebecca resisted, he shot her and fled the scene. Despite his denial, forensic analysis discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove found in Jeffrey's residence. As a result, he was convicted of Rebecca's murder and received a life sentence. While serving his sentence, Jeffrey faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica, despite he consistently denying any involvement in her disappearance. Nonetheless, a review of his phone records revealed that he was present at the Exxon gas station where Jessica was last seen on the night she vanished. He then went to his grandfather's house, about 13 minutes from the station. When police arrived at that house, they discovered something surprising. Although the front door was secured with heavy locking, the police were able to break in easily. What they discovered was disturbing. In the basement, they found a large stash of cleaning supplies, including various powders and bleaches, that had all been manufactured in early 2013, around the same time Jessica disappeared. It was found that Jeffrey had been absent from his job on April 27, 2013, the day after Jessica's disappearance. Colleagues reported that his absence was unusual. When he returned to work a few days later, he had noticeable deep scratches on his face and hands. This has made people who know him suspicious. A woman who visited the gas station on April 25, the evening before Jessica vanished, contacted the police. She had arrived at the station late that evening and expressed her concern to Jessica about being alone at such a late hour. Jessica acknowledged her concern with a nod. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station overheard the conversation and reassured the visitor, saying, "Don't worry, Jessica has customers who look after her." The man then left the gas station. Despite the stranger's reassurance, the visitor remained concerned about Jessica's safety and waited in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and headed home. Unfortunately, Jessica disappeared the following day. In 2016, the witness positively identified Jeffrey as the unknown man, recalling his presence at the gas station. Further investigation revealed that Jeffrey had frequently visited the Exxon gas station, interacting with Jessica at least 15 times prior to her disappearance. Kevin Bloom, a 48-year-old prison guard and Jeffrey's cousin, was arrested. During questioning, Kevin's statements were inconsistent, ultimately leading him to confess. He revealed details about Rebecca's death that were not publicly known at the time, and also admitted to helping Jeffrey hide Jessica's body. Kevin described how, on April 27, the day after Jessica's abduction, Jeffrey invited him to a party at his house. When Kevin arrived, he found Jessica lying lifeless and bound on the floor. Kevin and Jeffrey wrapped Jessica's body in a sheet and drove to a forest, where Jeffrey had already dug a grave. They buried Jessica and then returned home. When the police asked Kevin to take them to the burial site, he had difficulty remembering the exact location. Despite searching the forest for a while, he was unable to pinpoint the spot where they had buried Jessica's body. The trial of Jeffrey began, even though Jessica's body had not been found. The prosecution presented strong evidence to charge Jeffrey with kidnapping and murder. They alleged that he had been stalking Jessica for a long time. On April 26, 2013, Jeffrey allegedly parked near the gas station's entrance, went inside, and hit Jessica on the head with his gun. During the assault, the gun's laser sight cover fell off, and Jessica's blood was flowing to the floor. Jeffrey then allegedly dragged she out through the exit, put her in the back seat of his car, and drove her to his late grandfather's house. Forensic analysis of Jeffrey's devices revealed that he saved photos and news articles about the search for Jessica on his computer. As investigators followed the case, they found that he used a password that included her initials and the date April 27, 2013. This suggests that April 27, 2013, was likely the day she died, one day after her disappearance. Jeffrey maintained his innocence, claiming he was at home on the night Jessica was kidnapped. His lawyers pointed out that there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime, and no DNA evidence belonging to Jessica was found in his home or vehicle. Jeffrey's defense team argued that Jessica had been struggling with serious substance abuse problems in the time before her disappearance, suggesting that her kidnapping might be connected to her involvement in the illicit drug trade. Despite his claims of innocence, Jeffrey was found guilty of murdering Jessica and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse for his actions. Willis's cousin, Kevin Bloom, was also found guilty of helping to dispose of Jessica's body and received a sentence of 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Years after Jeffrey's conviction, new information came to light that implicated him in an older, unsolved case. On October 17, 1996, the body of Angela Thorberg was found in Fruitport, Michigan, with her killer never identified. After further investigation, Ed Blom, a 1988 high school graduate and Kevin Blom's father, was linked to the murder of Angela Thorberg in 1996. However, later evidence suggested that it was Jeffrey who became a suspect in Angela Thorberg's death. It has been 10 years since Jessica went missing, but her body has still not been found. After her disappearance, a court battle took place over the custody of Jessica and Dakota's son, Zon. Jessica's husband, Dakota, sought custody, but ultimately lost the case to Jessica's family. Zon currently lives with his grandparents and relatives on his father's side.